Hey everybody, I'm Nick Von Walkerbarth and you're listening to the Von Dubcast. I like to do a little bit of intro where I talk about what's happening in my life, a little bit of background on the guest, what I felt going into the interview, what I thought of the interview, and just whatever else is going on. If you'd like to jump right to the interview, you can skip to 9 minutes. If not, we have one sponsor and we'll get right into it. Today's episode is brought to you by Freshie in Grand Prairie. Freshie is it's kind of like a mixture between fast food and health food. It's quick, it's easy, and you get delicious, healthy food. It's a pillar in my journey to try and be healthy. It's usually sometimes the only thing I do that's healthy in a day, but it's always there for me and I really enjoy it. If you're ever in GP, please stop by and check them out. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 123 of the Von Dubcast. This was an episode that I recorded before my trip through the US. It's with 222 minutes. He likes to keep his name to himself just because of the topics he talks about and just the job that he does. He kind of wants to keep it to himself, but you got to go check out his podcast, 222 minutes, and his Twitter page. They're both extremely, extremely funny. Their political takes might only be for some of you guys, but what I really enjoy about it is whether I agree with the take or not, it's always funny, and he's always going for that humor aspect. And that, to me, just personally, I give so much more leeway to that when I know that you're trying to be funny and you're trying to educate people through that. It's up to you whether you want to take these things as gospel or not. You know, I don't want to speak for him, but especially when I start talking about stuff like we did in this conversation, you know, I'm not an expert in any of this shit. I'm just trying to ask questions and kind of figure it out, and I'm figuring it out on the fly. And oftentimes you guys can hear me like in the moment trying to figure out where my position is on it, because I don't know, I'm much more into the US side of the politics, and when it comes to Canada, I'm a little bit more lax. But that's where Twos really knows his shit and can really. It was fun to talk to him because where my knowledge lapses, he can kind of pick it right up. And there's lots of times where I maybe don't think as deeply on some of these subjects as I do because I misunderstand things, or I'm just like, well, I just don't get it and I don't want to spend the time to go do the research. But he can kind of keep me on track with, giving me more and more pieces of information to fully flesh out how it works and why things are certain ways. And I just thought it was an awesome, awesome conversation. Like I said, it was recorded at the start of January to mid-January. So much shit has changed. Ukraine, the trucker convoys, all this stuff kind of happened right after we talked, or in the time spanning between these two things. And like I always say in these intros, I always remember the feeling that a conversation gave me, and I always forget all the specific points. But just even looking at my papers from when we did it, we talked about how we got his start, kind of the political system. We talked about the Maverick Party, what he thinks of that. He actually did a bunch of interviews with certain Maverick Party leaders that were running in their ridings, and I thought that was really interesting. I really liked those podcasts that he did. It gave me a good insight into why they were standing up and what kind of changes they wanted to see. We talked about Twitter, talked about Rogan. Oh, we talked about the Slave Lake's MP. I think it's an MP. That might not be the right word. Whatever Pat Wren is to us in Slave Lake, and kind of that whole kerfuffle with the Slave Lake Mayor and Chamber of Commerce, Chamber, Council, City Council. There we go. I knew I'd get there. It just took me a little bit. Having to say, you know, this guy is not in the community. He doesn't show up prepared, and we've tried everything else. We've tried talking to him. We want to get him out, and then they kicked him out of the caucus or something, and they let him back in. Again, apologies because it's been so long since we had this discussion. I'm not even remembering, but I said it in a couple episodes ago, or months and months back, when I had one of the members of the Slave Lake Town Council on, Sean Gramlich, and we were talking about it. I would love to have Pat Wren on and hear his side of it. I don't think he ever would, but maybe he would. Who knows? If you're listening, Pat, would love to have you, or anybody close to him, or that here's kind of what we talk about, and we just kind of give our take on what we see from it. And we talk a lot about the C word on this podcast, some of the responses. Again, some of this is dated, and some of it probably seems like old news because of just how rapidly things have shifted in this last month. And I still haven't done my solo podcast where I really want to get into my deep feelings on the convoy and what people did and the response to it, almost more so. And then the response to the response, and to see kind of different groups of people and the logic they're using to either fit their own narratives or whatever it is. It doesn't seem like something I can do maybe in an intro to a podcast. So I'm definitely going to try and record a solo podcast, maybe even later today, after I take my dog for a good long walk in this snow apocalypse that's happening in Grand Prairie. But I'm really excited for this conversation to get out there. It was one of those ones where so much stuff was happening. I'm like, oh, it's just not really the right time. Something is going to be dated. But then it just kind of hit me, it's only going to get more dated, and there's only going to be more stuff that happen. If I don't just get it out there, I still really stand by this conversation from the time it's in, and you can probably poke a little bit more holes in it with kind of where things have gone. I don't remember. Maybe you can't. Maybe it's bulletproof. Maybe we predicted exactly what just happened. Who knows? I don't remember. But you guys can tell me. That's the nice thing is I love hearing about this. Where did we go wrong? And I know Tu's the same way. And if you reach out to him on Twitter, he's going to get back to you. He's going to maybe give it to you if you're an idiot. I don't know. I more so listen to the podcast than hop on Twitter and follow him there, but I know that's where he got his start. So if you hear something on this that you'd like more clarity on, if you do it in a polite way, you're probably gonna have a really great conversation, and that's what I love about these podcasts. So other than that, things going on in my life, which I always give you guys little updates. Sold my place in Grand Prairie. Possession is end of next month, so I've started this process of packing up here. It's going to be a sad day to leave. There's lots of people that I love at work that are here, but I'm sure I'll be back lots. One of the big things, the gym, Champion Gym, just got to go to my first class back on Friday, and it was tough. Oh my God, I just got rolled into a pretzel by everybody. I was just like, maybe I'm just terrible at this and I should just give up. Like, it was that bad. I was like, oh my God, this is just the worst. No cardio, just getting absolutely smashed by everybody. But just went this morning to the Sunday roll and I felt much better. I think it might have just been the rust, but I kind of had a little bit of breath control and got a few submissions. It was lots of fun. I really enjoyed it. Man, I love those Sunday rolls they do at Champion Gym. If you're ever in Grand Prairie and you do jiu-jitsu or you want to try it out, go to Champion Gym. And my favorite part is the Sunday open rolls. It's just by donation. Anybody from any other gym can come. So everybody in Grand Prairie comes to the one gym on Sundays at 11, and there's no big warm-ups. There's no big drilling or learning any new moves. It's just an hour of rolling with everybody and everyone laughing and having fun, getting tapping people. It is the best. People have looked at me like I'm crazy, like my parents and my friends, when I'm, for the last since October, I've just been scheduling my life between Edmonton and Grand Prairie, and I'm always making sure I'm back for a Sunday, right? And they're like, why are you leaving on a Saturday? Like, stay for the weekend, you idiot. I'm like, but the Sunday roll, it's so much fun. I got to get there. So that's been awesome. I'm really not looking forward to losing that. I'm sure I'll have to do some trips back up here to hop in with those guys. It's just awesome community. Not only is jiu-jitsu great, but just really good people. And I really enjoy going there. Other than that, sold the house, did that. Everything else I'll probably get into on the solo episode. I got some other stuff going on in life, girl stuff. You know how it is. It's always girl stuff. Hey, always. And other than that, I think that's pretty much everything going on in my life. I know this episode's a long one, but I really think it's a solid one. Couple good beers were drank. It was a big drive down to Calgary and back in the day to do this episode, and it was so worth it to me to do that, 5 hours or whatever it is. I don't know, 6 hours of driving in a day was so worth it for a conversation like this. I would do that any day. So, I think that answered a lot of questions for me about what I'm doing and is this stuff worth it, just to be able to spend a whole day driving just for a conversation like this. And is it going to be worth it? And yes, it was. And I can't wait to do more like that. Get down to Calgary more, get out to Lloyd, get, all over the place, whatever is within driving distance. And even if it's not, maybe I just got to, do a little bit of planning, which I'm the worst at, in scheduling, and I can get even farther than that. But other than that, do all those things I always ask you guys. They really help. Following the podcast on social media, sharing it with a friend, all those little things, they all really help, and I'm really appreciative of it. The YouTube channel, all that stuff. So if you guys could do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. And other than that, have a great week, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye. All right, thanks for being here, Twos. It's an honor to have you. It's a real Canadian icon after I listened to a few more episodes. Feels like a real rock star.
Well, I think I got a long ways to go before I'm a Canadian icon.
Yeah.
But
that's what I'm here for, to pump your tires, get you there.
There you go. Yeah. That's right. It's not going to get there on its own.
So I'm curious where this kind of journey all started. It sounds like just from what I've put together from listening, used to be just more of a Twitter thing. Is that where you started off? Like, how long ago was that when you started kind of getting into that game, commentating on stuff, putting your 2 cents out there plus 20 others?
Yeah. Well, it was, I don't know, about 3-4 years ago, something like that. I was making a professional change and I'd been a little bit outspoken on Facebook.
Yeah.
And nothing bad or crazy or anything like that. But I didn't want to take the chance of having someone look it up and be like, oh, that's not going to be a good culture fit. And so just completely scorched earth the Facebook account.
Yeah.
And then, excuse me, I kind of felt as though I had still kind of an itch to scratch in terms of having some stuff to say. And there was, more than a few people who I was friends with on Facebook just because they thought that the stuff I was saying was interesting.
Right.
And then I'd had a mostly dormant, I guess, Twitter account that followed This Hour's 22 Minutes.
Yeah.
And every time I saw them tweet, I just think like, these guys suck. They're horrible. I could do a better job.
Yeah.
And then one day I was like, screw it. I'll just go ahead and do a better job.
Right.
And then the timing of it worked out really well with the Liberal government getting Twitter to shut down the Catherine McKenna parody account.
Right.
And then it kind of blew up and it had been going like that ever since. But then I guess as far as how it went into the podcast, I still felt as though I had a few more things to say and just sort of, I guess, that creative urge, if that makes sense. Yeah. And you can do a lot on Twitter, but you can't do everything. And I'd reached out to a few people about doing some ghostwriting of stuff for YouTube. Yeah. And nobody was interested. And so then I'd gotten the suggestion from somebody that said, hey, why don't you just do a podcast?
Yeah.
I thought, well, obviously, duh.
Yeah.
And so then I sat down and went over kind of what's out there. And well, I mean, everything's out there as far as podcasts go. But in terms of what I felt would be the best fit for what I just felt like doing, and then sort of just, different things like what kind of tempo I wanted and how long I wanted them to be. Because if you listen to it, it definitely doesn't fit the mainstream mold of podcasts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it fills its niche quite well.
For sure.
I mean, if I can pump my own tires here a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, that was kind of it. And I rolled with it. And it's been astonishingly successful. I've been really surprised with the amount of positive feedback I've gotten, especially considering the fact that I don't advertise it.
Yeah.
I've been very adamant about the fact that it's just something that's a fun, creative outlet.
Yeah.
And, I don't have any official sponsors or anything like that. In the last episode, I had a totally made up fake sponsor, which I had some fun with. But I'm beholden to no one. I can say whatever I want, whatever I'm thinking, and just have as much fun with it as I possibly can. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of that.
Yeah. And I think that is something that is the strength. I mean, you say it's not the typical mold for a podcast and what that is, but to me, the only thing that really makes a podcast is that what you just mentioned at the end there, not being beholden to anyone. That's the specialness. That's a power. Everyone tries to think, CBC is going to start a podcast or all these, like a CNN podcast because they're just trying to capitalize on it, but they're completely missing the mark of what it is, right? Like, I would say, a CNN podcast is way less of a podcast than, what I'm doing here that gets, when you look at them by the usual metrics of what people would deem, like, oh, that is more of an established podcast. To me, that's not a podcast at all because you're still beholden to all those different people that people are running from, right? And that's what people are running two podcasts for, right? And I think that's of all the things you mentioned, that's the biggest thing. As long as it has that, now you're in the spirit. It might not be the actual definition of a podcast, but the spirit of what makes podcasts strong, that's what it is, right? To me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not typically, I've done a few of them and enjoyed them. Interviews, I guess I should say. But mostly it's just me speaking my mind.
Yeah.
And there's a few other podcasts out there that do that. And I've found them to be the kind of thing where you're getting, a couple thoughts a minute sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where, you've said before that you listen to podcasts sped right up.
Oh, yeah.
And most of those individual person just monologuing, I feel like most of those, you can't speed them up enough.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much filler. And so the whole idea is just get in, listen, get out.
Yeah.
It's funny. I struggle with the pacing every time because I try and fit so much in there, and you get really worked up, and then you're talking fast. And the last episode was something like 3,600 words.
Yeah.
Because it's all a script that I write out beforehand.
Yeah.
Except for I actually had one flub up on the fly in that episode. And I was like, no, that's actually pretty good. I'm going to keep that.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's just straight. It's me running off something that I'm working on delivering as best I can. And that episode was only 22 minutes. And you think about that, like that's like 150 words a minute.
Yeah.
And so it's very rapid fire. There's not a whole lot of room for pauses or breaks. Or, there's no time to catch your breath. By the time I've gone past one point or one punchline, I'm already on to the next one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the nice thing is I think a lot of people tend to listen to it multiple times too.
Yeah.
Because you kind of almost have to, which is good. I'm totally fine with that.
Exactly. And I think what lends it to that is kind of, you mentioned it there as filler, right? And most podcasts, especially long form, there might be some filler, and it depends how you use that filler. Because to me, some of my favorite podcasts, they have filler because that's just the consequence of leaving it open to have the type of conversations that they're creating the space for.
Yep.
There's going to be filler in it. But like with what you're doing, because it's scripted, there's not an ounce of filler. There's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there that isn't there for a point, right? Which is now to go back through, right? Like sometimes I wouldn't want to listen to a podcast because it's like, oh, I might want to listen to the salient points of that podcast, right? In 3 hours, but I don't want to listen to all the filler in between that gets you there, right? Some podcasts are start to finish 3 hours engrossing, and I would really listen to that all the time, but not all of them, right?
No, absolutely. And there's some where you just look at it and you think, okay, well, I would love to listen to everything. Here, I'm going to shit talk Joe Rogan because whatever, right? I mean, if you're going to punch all the way up. But I really like his stuff. The problem is that unless it's a guest that captures my interest because I'm like, hey, I know this person, or they're talking about something I'm really interested in, I don't listen to every single one of his podcasts, because you look at it and you're like, Jesus Christ, I don't have 3 hours.
Yeah.
And so like there's some other big names where I don't listen to the podcast, but I will definitely go look at the highlights on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where I was just thinking, well, why would I go to the trouble of doing something that's a few hours long that people are just going to want to be, even if it's not available, they'll have that itch to, or that urge to just check out, as you said, the salient points, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what's beautiful about something like that is there's a bunch of different kinds of fans. There's fans like yourself that pick and choose the episodes that they want to take on. And that's awesome that there's such a wealth of them there that you can do that. And it is easily there where maybe in a 3 or 4 month span, there might be 2, 3, 4 episodes that you like and you really take in and they impact you, right? But then there's fans like myself where, and I think this is due to the fact that they are 3 hours long and there's so much of in that filler, it's hard to hide who you are, right? And more of who you are very deep down as a person comes out. And that's who I fell in love, right? Like I love Joe Rogan as a person and all the stuff and the different content. So it doesn't matter who he's having on. I like to it's like a friend, right? It's like, I get so much different things out of the podcast that I understand that maybe 99% of people wouldn't get that out of it, but I do, right? And it leaves that door open where you can have a bunch of different kinds of fans, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the strengths of what that long form podcast is, because it's just out there in the universe, and you make what it allows all the fans to make what they will out of it, right? To take, maybe I'm going to listen to an episode once a year. Maybe you listen to every single one. Maybe you just listen to the highlights, all these different ways, but it allows for that, right? Like, whereas something like yours is a little bit different, where it's, everyone's going to enjoy it the same way, but it's so good in the way that it's good, right? Like it's the laughs per minute are really high. The salient points are always there, right? There's none of that filler. So it's very particular to what you're getting out of it, but within that realm, it's the best that it can be. It's the best that you can offer, and it's iterating and getting better each time, which is something that we've talked about in every podcast is going to get to.
Yeah.
But it's almost refining down into this one thing, whereas instead of like the Joe Rogans of the world, and I could put myself in that, where we're trying really hard not to refine down into anything and to leave it open to be whatever it's going to be on that day, right? And I think those are two really special things that couldn't be farther apart from each other, but that's why I come back to that thing of,
well, how is that a podcast and this a podcast, right? They're so different. But but what makes them strong is that they're not beholden to anything. And what makes them strong is that it's truly what you want to bring to it. And it's truly what Joe Rogan wants to bring to it. There's nobody in this, in his ear. There's nobody in your ear telling him you have to do this. There's no sponsors giving you shit because you talk shit about their company. It's complete.
Well, or even just, I mean, I say things that I stand behind everything I've said on the show and everything I've ever tweeted. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I could see any sane company being reticent to advertise on a podcast that talks about that makes a joke about how NDP voters have birth defects.
Yeah.
Right? Now, maybe you think that's funny, maybe you don't, but from a corporate standpoint, you're probably not going to want to align your business with it.
Right.
One of the things I will say, I don't know if it's maybe something I should think about trying to do differently, or maybe it's a point to the success of my podcast, but any established episodes, so I mean, obviously the new ones because they're still getting listened to.
Yeah.
But pretty much every episode has roughly the same play count. Like it's quite static going across, which tells me that anybody who listens to it more or less listens to all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they're pretty easy to binge as well. They're kind of Ted Lasso-esque in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm yet to see it. I've heard so many good things about it.
Oh, dude. So I just started it the other night and watched an entire season in, I think, one sitting, you know, aside from a couple bathroom breaks, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then last night I started cracking season 2 and I got 4 episodes in and it was 1 a.m. and I'm like, nope, I go to bed. It's a really good feel good show. It's almost like what Scrubs was in the early years.
Yeah.
You know, where you're smiling, you're laughing, and you're actually getting that sort of, you're cheering along with everybody the whole way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a really happy, optimistic show.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird though. I'd say it's probably, I mean, I haven't seen all of it yet, but so far I would say it's one of my favorite shows ever.
Yeah.
Being not even a season and a half into it, but I would say my other favorite show ever is Banshee. So, I mean, two completely different.
I don't even know what that is.
Okay. All right.
Not to offend you.
We're going to shut the podcast down, do a quick marathon, and then we're going to come back to this.
All right.
Wow. Okay. Banshee, I don't even know what to say. It's
what year?
Oh,
Set the scene.
Probably
Paint me a
about
picture.
2013, 2014.
Okay. Oh, so it's a new one. All right.
Fairly new. Anthony Starr, who is the Kiwi guy who plays Homelander in The Boys.
Okay.
He was the main face of this show.
Gotcha.
And it's a whole lot of violence and corruption and boobs all over the place. It's everything that Sons of Anarchy should have been.
Right.
And dear Lord, the fight sequences.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like in the first season, there's this one where it's probably like an 8-minute fight between this chick and this Russian dude. And they just beat the piss out of each other in this barn loft. And then there's like every season has at least a few of these huge, crazy, drawn out, really well filmed, you get right into it fights that just go on. And you don't get tired of it at all.
Yeah.
Like you're on the edge of your seat the whole time. And then it's got some interesting dynamics. There's this Dutch colony, kind of a Hutterite sort of thing that one of the guys left and formed a crime syndicate from. And he's kind of the main bad guy in the show. And then you've got these other things. There's a reservation nearby and there's a lot of tension with that and a little bit of corruption in there. And then there's a military base. And so it's just all kinds of people with not necessarily opposite goals, but different goals and different motivations. And you've got this guy who's an ex-con that sort of stumbles into taking on the identity of this guy who was supposed to be the new sheriff. And then he is fumbling his way through trying to lead an entire team of police officers while still being a little bit imperfect.
Yeah.
And it's just captivating and interesting, and oh my God, you gotta check it out.
Hey,
you gotta check it out, man.
I'll definitely check it out after a breakdown like that. I mean, I got it really. Oh,
yeah,
I'm surprised I never even heard of it.
That's the thing. Almost nobody ever has. Anytime I see it up on Twitter, I always talk about it.
Yeah,
and there's the same couple people who seem to always pick up when I'm talking about it, and they'll second and third my opinion on it. But aside from that, there's just a whole lot of like, what? And everybody's seen The Boys. And if you haven't seen The Boys, you should watch The Boys. And if you've watched The Boys, you should read the comics. They are some of the best graphic novels that you're ever going to read. Hands down. Like, there's a reason why they got picked to make a show.
Right. Yeah.
And this is the guy that is one of the two main captivating faces of that franchise. A few years before that, doing a different role, but being that same captivating center of an entire program.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, lots of boobs.
Lots of you can't go wrong with that. I mean, Game of Thrones really ham-handed that in there. I mean,
the quality dropped off when the boobs did.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, like you could plot how many boobs and how good the show is.
Yeah,
and they would roughly correlate.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of other reasons why it sucked at the end. But the point is that you could really oversimplify things and say that the more boobs it had, the better it was.
Fair enough. And what was so sad about that was I'm a big book guy. I mean, seeing the bookshelf here, you must be a pretty big book guy yourself, but you never want to be that guy that, the movies suck, the books are better, because nobody likes that guy. But when Game of Thrones come out, it was definitely not perfect, but it was close enough to the mark that it was really nice to be excited about it and to not have to be that guy for the first couple seasons. And then as it got further and further, you started missing bigger and bigger pieces, and they started to just completely lop off complete storylines that were added in, complete characters got lopped off, and it was like, okay, I get it. Those are thick books. There's so much. There's so many characters. How do you do it? But
there was two things that really just to this day bug me that they cut out. And one of them was the Battle of Blackwater Reef, where they had all the wildfire that they set on all the boats.
Yeah, and the big chain that came up.
Well, they didn't have the chain, pardon me, did they? I can't remember if they had the
I
chain in the
rewatched
story
the show
or not. But they had the chain
books.
in the books.
Yeah,
and that was Tyrion going out of his way to get every metalsmith of every kind in the entire city building giant links for this chain. Yeah. And everybody's just thinking like,
and everyone's questioning, what are you doing, you idiot? Yeah.
Weird idiot midget.
Yeah.
And you're telling us to stop making jewelry and start making giant iron links of chain. This is beneath me. And he gets all this pushback. And then because there was that big chain that they pulled up out of the water after all the ships came in, they couldn't get out of the way when the wildfire came in, and it burned them all down, and that saved the city.
Yeah.
And so, he never really got any recognition for it, but you could tell what happened. And then the other thing, do you remember there was that really tall dude in the show named The Mountain?
Yes.
Okay. Well, remember when he did that, battle that Tyrion got to shoot the dude from Mandalorian to fight for him?
Oh, Oberyn.
Oberyn, yeah, whatever it was. So the cool thing about that was that Oberyn went into a duel to the death with a poisoned blade, and then just nicked the mountain a couple times. And then that poison was a poison that was going to take several days to slowly kill him.
Yeah.
So he hated the mountain so much that he went into that battle knowing that he was just going to give him a couple scratches and then let the mountain kill him, just so that the mountain could have a slow, agonizing death over several days afterwards.
But he didn't want to let him kill him. His plan was never to.
Then why did he bring that poison in?
He did, because that's how he wanted to. And he thought he was, right? He thought the poison was taking effect, and I've won, right? Kind of similar to the show.
Well, no, because the poison. When
and again, I haven't reread the books for a couple of years, so I might be off on that, but I was fairly certain that he didn't go in there meaning to die, because I think they had a bunch of things planned that they were kind of working in the books that in the background of
Yeah, so there was the stuff in the background, and the plots and schemes within
There's
schemes
always
and
schemes
whatever
and schemes
else, right?
and schemes, yeah.
But the thing about it was that the something romancer, or I can't remember, it was a different name than necromancer, and it wasn't the pyromancers, but that creepy old dude that ends up bringing him back to life.
Yeah, he
said at one particular scene when the mountain's in the next room screaming in agony, like, well, this particular poison takes effect over several days,
for sure,
and gives him an agonizing death.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, so this dude put in, and because everybody from that area of the world, or not everybody from that area of the world, but he definitely was an expert on poisons.
Yeah.
So it's not as though he screwed it up and got the wrong one.
Right.
He specifically
on
picked
purpose,
a poison that was going to take several days to kill the mountain.
For sure.
And then gave it to him in a duel to the death that was not going to take several days. So the only logical conclusion I got from that
I see what you're saying.
was that he went in there planning on letting the mountain kill him so that after the mountain left, he could just slowly die that agonizing, horrible death because he killed his niece and nephew, or two nieces or whatever it was.
Right. And I agree with everything you just said, except for the part. I think what he was trying to do was right. He just knew he would nick him a couple of times. He was going to be too quick to be caught by him, right? And he was trying to get him to be in a bunch of pain to admit to killing them, because he never admitted that he killed the daughters. He was trying to get him to admit to it.
He would have just picked a different poison then, something that was more fast acting and painful but less lethal, right? Because you've got this entire world of poisons, and the nice thing about making up your own world is you can just say, okay, well, you've got milk of the poppy here, and you've got this thing over there, and this is the super painful poison that's really fast acting, and you can introduce it in the second book, and then in the fourth book they can have that battle, and he'll use that poison.
But I think he did. But I think also a point of it was that he wanted him to suffer over days. He wanted to have the most painful death that he could have, whether he admitted it or not. He wanted him to suffer, right? Because their family had suffered for what was it, 10, decades. 20 years at that point, right? And this was finally that had come up. It's against all that, right? So like, I think the only thing different is just I don't think he ever, just knowing Oberon and his, like, who he was in the books, that he would ever, like, he had way more stuff planned in his life. Like, I just don't think he was going into it planning on dying that day.
All right, I'm gonna have to go back and read.
Me too, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not confident in saying that. That's the only thing that I might disagree with you, just because I have read the books probably 4 or 5 times. I just haven't done it in a while.
I've only read them like 3 times, so you're up on me there.
But to see a fellow rereader, this is something that me and my sister talk about a lot. We were actually just talking about it yesterday. Was because, like, specifically the Harry Potter series, but a bunch of our favorite series we've read a lot of times, right? And I like to fancy myself as probably someone that's read the Harry Potter series more than the average cat. Like, I probably read it over 20 times, and my sister makes me look like child's play. Like, she reads them like 3 times a year. Right?
Oh, wow.
And knows it. And sometimes I go to do the same thing where I'll have a little bit of an argument, and then I have to sit there halfway through going, I'm probably wrong right now, because you definitely, like, as much as I think I know these things in the back of my hand, like, you definitely know them more than me. So I'm just going to back off here, right? Like,
it's fair. And it was one thing that I really like about him is that George R. R. Martin tends to leave things implied rather than show, don't say.
Yeah.
He did a lot more of just demonstrating how things happen than saying, oh, well, this person always does this, and this is what they're thinking, and then this is what they're doing. And he doesn't lead you by the hand. He leaves you to put the pieces together yourself.
For sure.
Very, very well.
Which I think is what's so amazing, that the show was as good as it was, because think of how hard that would be to take that style, exactly what you're saying, where he leaves stuff to figure out yourself, and TV doesn't work that way, right? Like, that's very much a thing of literature with TV.
TV does work that way. It's just that they never work it that way.
Yeah, well, they've got to shove everything down your throat. Exactly. Good TV should do it that way, but when's the last time good TV is 1 in 500 shows is good TV these days.
Ted Lasso, right? And Banshee, and that's about it.
There you go. So that's what I'm saying. Like, to realize the shortfalls of Hollywood kind of thing, and to see this is, like, as much as I'm disappointed in those last couple seasons and the way it deteriorated, especially with the source material that they had to work with, I think, having said that, I still need to give them some flowers for how good they were able to make those first few seasons, because of the usual ways that Hollywood sucks should have made that just unwatchable trash from the beginning. And they were at least able to get a few good seasons that did somewhat justice to that amazing source material. Whereas, right, if you're keeping your expectations in check, that was a pretty impressive thing, right? And sure, they went off the tracks later on. It turned to dog shit, but still got to give them a couple claps for it, right? That they were able to put something out there that is watchable, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. I would say as a counterpoint, though, that they had this incredibly detailed roadmap already made out for them. I mean, you already spoke about how weighty these tomes are.
Yeah.
They're not exactly light reading. And so you've got so much stuff in there, and it's such a rich and well-written world, and it's not like Tolkien. I'm going to shit on Tolkien here. I think he's crap, but he did a great job. Like, it was an 80-page board meeting about whether or not they were going to, over who they were going to send and whether or not they were going to go to throw the ring in Mordor. Yeah. That in the book was 80 pages.
Yeah.
Anybody who lives in the real world nowadays knows that meetings are too long now. Could you imagine a meeting with 80 pages of follow-up notes afterwards?
Yeah.
And so, anyway, he did a brilliant job of building that world. I just think he sucked at the rest of the story in it. He had some good dialogue, and like I said, amazing world building. I mean, he even made his own language for it, right?
Yeah.
But the story itself, while having some good classic tropes in it, I didn't find it all that compelling. It's probably one of the only times where I've liked the book better than the show. Possible exception, Dexter. But
do you mean that you like the movies better than the books? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. And this one, I'd love to commiserate with you, but that's one of the few very well-known fantasies that I haven't read. I've read The Hobbit halfway about 3 times, and I just never...
See, and that probably tells you all you need to know about it. Yeah. Although The Hobbit was written for a much younger audience than the actual trilogy.
And I didn't dislike it. And I was enjoying it too, just for whatever reason, and that probably speaks more to it, that if I really liked it that much, I would have made it a point to finish it, but it just kind of fell off, right? And it was not that I was disliking it, and I put it like, oh, I can't finish it. Just got busy with other stuff. Maybe another book came out, and I got hooked on that, right? But giving it more tries and to keep having that happen, it probably speaks to something there that's missing. What I'm curious, just because we got on, this was not where I planned for it to go, but I love the conversation topic. What would you say your favorite book series is then? Banshee the books.
Well, I would say, I mean, we already talked about it, but the Game of Thrones books, A Song of Ice and Fire.
That'd be the top.
But aside from that, I would say probably The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as far as series go.
I've never read that one.
Oh, dude, they're phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, maybe that'll be the next one on the list.
Those are fairly light, easy reading, but they are just absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect contrast because it's written versus spoken, but I really try and have that sort of... I love his delivery, and I love his roundabout thought process of talking about how he'll just take some everyday life things and just point out how funny they are when you take them out of context.
Yeah.
Because just some regular boring ass thing on Earth, but then if you put it in some far off planet bordering or orbiting around the star Betelgeuse, all of a sudden it becomes funny in a completely different way. Yeah, and so I try and take that as sort of, I probably, lost for words, so I'm not getting inspiration from the book right now.
Yeah.
But that sort of thought process and where I feel like he was going in terms of how he wrote the books, I try and imagine myself going in that same way when it comes to pointing out how silly some of the stuff that happens in this world is.
And how so many people can just eat it up and not question it at all, when all it takes is for someone to throw, I think a lot of times, humor, and I think especially with your podcast, you use humor for this use, but sprinkling that same thing in with a little bit of humor really makes it hard not to see the hypocrisy or the idiocy or the whatever it is that's there that is causing those feelings to be there. Humor is that thing where it's really hard not to, because once you've laughed, you've admitted it to yourself, right?
Well, and the thing about it is if it's not anchored in this little grain of truth, like if it's just something completely ridiculous, like if I just said Justin Trudeau is a giant stupid dragon.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really all that funny. But I can make a completely out of left field joke about blackface while I'm talking about something completely different. and just keep moving right past it into something else.
Yeah.
And that hits home because it brings up all of those same things that happen with him, where he is just one of the most hypocritical people around. And even if you like Trudeau, part of you is probably admitting right now that there is a lot about the guy that is very, very phony and superficial and
disingenuous to the
absolutely.
Degree. Yeah.
And so when you point that out, that might make you feel uncomfortable, and maybe you don't like my show. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep doing it whether you like it or not. But at the same time, part of you in the back of your brain is recognizing that it's grounded somewhere. It's like when there was that big leftist wave of anger at everybody pointing out the fact that Trudeau had that Instagram photo where he had a laptop in front of him, and it was an HP laptop, but he'd put the Apple sticker on top of the front of it. And so the obvious criticism is that it's just he's just a guy that's just a sticker.
Yeah.
There's no substance here. It's all about the appearance.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't a valid criticism, then the people that support him on the left would have just shrugged and been like, yeah, they're idiots, whatever. But the fact that they fought back so vitriolic about that they were so angrily defending him, like, how dare you? And he's the best prime minister ever. And, oh, captain, my captain. Well, you know what? Your ship's sinking.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're fighting against us laughing at that so much tells me that somewhere deep down inside, in a place you're not ready to talk about yet, that you probably don't even realize it yet in the front of your brain, but in the back of your brain, there's a little seed that knows that he is full of shit.
For sure. And I think most people know that. And the biggest thing that I love to see, and I think you do a good job of this, is to say, you know what? Sometimes it hurts to hear these things, but it's not an attack on, like, to me, what Trudeau is to me is just a perfect representation of what they all are. He's maybe the most glaring, like, there's not even like a piece of genuineness of who he is. Like, you have no idea who he is because he is so vapid and so just in appearance. He's like, it's so cliche to call a politician a puppet, but it is such a, textbook example of it. But this is a lesson to everybody that this is every single politician at that level.
It's absolutely. I mean, if you look at it, I would say if you just took everything about politics today and sifted out the very, very few decent ones, and you ran it through some kind of a filter, and then triple distilled it, and then let it age in a barrel for 18 years, and then you serve it. That is the essence of Justin Trudeau. He is just the epitome of, because you're right, they're all cut from the same cloth with very, very few exceptions.
There's just a lot of people that are better at hiding it, where he is just, that's what's so frustrating to guys like me and you, is like, at least pretend like there used to be some sort of, like, politicians always were like this, but at least you could put a little bit of a face on and not slap us in the face with it. But when you're that inept at that, and there's nothing underneath it to be that something for people to hook onto, that they can see, that they can feel that's true. There's nothing there.
Okay, this is a guy whose first full-time job was in his 40s as a member of parliament. Okay? This is a guy who, like it or not, I don't care how much you love Trudeau.
Yeah.
Right? You could have a picture of him in every room in your house, and you could draw hearts around it. And no matter how much you adore this particular human being, you have to be able to admit that if it wasn't for the fact that he is Pierre Elliott Trudeau's maybe son, I mean, there's that question too, right? But if it wasn't for his name and his position with the debacle that was early 80s politics, he would not be prime minister right now. There is no way in a million years that a part-time snowboard instructor just has some big Cinderella story. He's the exact thing that the left claims to hate, where he's just been He's a trust fund kid that's had everything handed to him all his life. Rex Murphy's talked about this a lot. He's just the epitome of white privilege. And when people on the left talk about how evil this is, and then they go and vote for that dipshit.
Yeah.
Like, tell me how that makes any sense. You want to fix the problem? You say that we need to get rid of male privilege? Well, let's look at the brightest shining star in the sky and let's shoot it down. Right? Yeah. Oh, but that's our guy. Yeah. But that's the way it always is. It's always, oh, this is our guy, so we're going to leave him untouched. Oh, that's, and it really doesn't matter what side of things you're on. Like, he got a lot of hell for the pompous pictures of him standing, kneeling over the graves of the unmarked graves at the indigenous schools. I can't remember the exact words eluding me, but the indigenous
schools.
Yes, thank you. And people, well, let's just pick on Saskatchewan for a second. Lots of folks in Saskatchewan gave him shit about that, but hardly any of them talked about the fact that Scott Moe was there on that same day doing virtually the same pose with a slightly different teddy bear. And so if one guy is being a pompous, opportunistic asshole, and the other guy is doing the exact same thing on the exact same day, probably on the exact same grave, how is he doing anything different? Exactly. Right? But he gets a pass because he's our guy. I don't think there should be any passes, regardless of what guy, as soon as you start making allowances for your team, that's when you start losing me. But the problem is that if you apply that sort of blanket, let's have people who do what's right all the time, those are the people who don't get elected. You need those two-faced pricks who tell one side of the country that they need to phase out the oil sands and tell the other side of the country that they're here to support you. Those are the people who get elected, because that's the guy who did get elected.
And that's how the game is rigged, so that's the only option that you're going to get. And those people that we talk about, of the things that we want to have, people that have something they stand behind and that there's actual some substance to them, those people would never be allowed to get to that point in the first place. That's how the whole system is designed.
No,
right?
They get weeded out years before that.
Exactly. But that's my point of what I struggle with so much is this. I have the same anger with the people that defend Trudeau along those lines of, oh, he's just our guy, and the people that hate Trudeau so much. And I don't blame them for that, because clearly there's been lots of reasoning, but the fact that they are blind to those same things, maybe a little bit better paint job over top of it, because clearly Trudeau is the worst example. We've already covered that, of having no paint job on top of that, of what the worst idea of what these politicians, what they all are. Because they hate Trudeau so much, they're willing to overlook it in their own candidates, where they are just blue to the death. And it's like, no, these are the same people doing the same thing, being funded by the same corporations that have completely sold you out for decades. And you just are keeping on buying into the system because it's your guy. You are just as bad as those guys on the other side doing it for Trudeau. Right?
Okay, well, I'll throw out an olive branch to anybody who didn't just immediately shut this off because they're a huge Trudeau fanboy. And they're still listening. And I'm going to piss off everybody else who's just been nodding their head and smiling.
Exactly,
and right on,
That's what
right
this
on.
podcast does.
All right. Well, here, I'm going to piss off every single one of you guys. One of the funniest things I've ever heard Trudeau say was that "thanks for your donation" quip.
Which one was that?
So
I don't follow Canadian politics all that much, to be honest.
You live here though, right? Yeah. Okay. So what happened is that these people, they have fundraisers. And so they'll have like $1,000 a plate event. Where, do you want the chicken or the fish? That's going to be a 4-figure meal. But you get to have a quick handshake and maybe a picture with Aaron O'Toole or Jagmeet Singh, or I don't know why you'd want a picture, but Elizabeth May, and then also Justin Trudeau. And so the Liberals had one, and Justin Trudeau was there. And so right early on in the morning, these people had paid, I think, like $2,000 each to get in there and rushed the stage. They were from one of the First Nations, I believe in Ontario, that was having issues with the water, which, I mean, that doesn't really narrow it down much, and that's a big problem. But, and I'm not delegitimizing their concern at all, because I think that, I honestly think that that's something that we need to fix, and it is never going to be fixed if it's left at the federal level, regardless of who's in power. I don't care. I don't care who's running the show. You're not going to fix it from Gatineau, Quebec, by a bunch of bureaucrats who would be out of a job if they fixed it. Like you've got thousands of people whose entire job is to deal with the ongoing bullshit created by us not having clean drinking water. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, well, what if we fix this? Well, then we got to go work at Revenue Canada?
Yeah.
No, we will keep not fixing it.
Yeah. It can go another round.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? And so, anyhow, these people showed up at this dinner.
Yeah.
They brought a big banner out and just kind of stormed the stage right early on, first thing in the night. Mm-hmm. And then security escorted them out. Yeah. And so this is the thing that they paid, $2,000 a head, probably like 4 of them. Yeah. So $8,000. They paid $8,000 to storm the stage for 30 seconds and then get walked out. And then Trudeau says, "Thank you for your donation."
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it was more that it was insensitive to their concerns, but just the fact that they paid an absolute shit ton of money to have no FaceTime, do absolutely nothing to further their cause, just this brief little publicity stunt that just got gently escorted out of the building. And then for him to be like, "Well, thanks for your donation." I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm a little bit morbid.
Right.
So there's that. I can allow for that.
Yeah. And I think that gives, to me, what gives more weight to people is when they can see from both sides, right? Like the willingness to only see one side or to only laugh at jokes that don't affect you, right? Like that is just such a sign of capture or unintelligence. You want to give a more charitable word to it. You don't want to, call people names because that's what pulls everyone apart. But I don't know. I struggle with it because I so much see the issues with a guy like Trudeau. And I so much want to, like, I love how you do it because I feel like you've found a really good way of making it funny and highlighting the hypocrisy of it. But what I'm scared to do myself is to allow that to be those people that are blue till the death and all that, to just latch onto that and give them excuses not to look in their own backyard and to recognize this, because nothing is going to change. Exactly what you just said, like running water for every reserve in Canada, right? That is not being fixed. That it's so easy for people on the blue side to go, "Oh, we're going to blame this on the red guys," right? It doesn't matter who's in power, right? It doesn't change anything. And all you're doing is adding wood to that fire when you support one side or the other. There's nothing that helps.
Well, and to think that it's only broken at the federal level is absolutely ridiculous. Quick side note, we're going to want to cut this out, but I'm here, and I'm not sure if you are, but when you're tapping on the table...
Oh, you're getting a buzz?
It's getting picked up on this mic a little bit. I can give you something to...
I'll just want to tap on the table.
Well, yeah, we could do that too.
That's probably easier.
Yeah, I could give you something soft, a nice little pillow or something.
Yeah, that's what I need.
Swing against shit when you want.
I get very animated when I talk.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting. Like this is the same table I record at, right? Yeah. And I'm very. It's okay for me because I've got the boom arm, right? But I end up just doing a whole lot of
pointing,
like the oh shoot. The Atlanta, is it it's the Atlanta Braves. Yeah. I just do a whole lot of
tomahawk chop.
Really fast-paced tomahawk chops while I'm talking, and I get right into it because I don't want to be banging on the table and having that show up, because I don't know a damn thing about audio engineering.
Yeah,
but I've learned a little bit, and you don't want to hear that in an episode. It kind of takes it away from it. So anyway, that's, I don't know. Who knows? You might even want to keep that bit in.
Well, hey, I like to keep as much in as I can. I love the realism, because that's my favorite podcast, right? The guys that they show, like, you're getting the soup to nuts, front to back. We're not cutting nothing out of this type of thing, right? There's times for it, obviously, the bathroom breaks and the little things, right, that are just directly taken away from your experience. But I feel like people get so caught up sometimes in worrying about that, where it actually adds to my experience, right? Like, sometimes my favorite parts, as someone that listens to way more podcasts than probably is healthy for any human being, there's times where people mean to edit things out and just forget about it, so they're talking as if they do. That is some of my favorite moments in podcasting, when they think they edit it. And I've made this mistake. I've left bathroom breaks in. I've done this before, right? I'm not innocent of it, but like, I enjoy that. That's what proves to me that, this is, being run. It's not some corporation like CNN that's gone through by 30 people, and then they all go in a room and they decide what to cut out, and it's focus group. They show it to 6 different focus groups before it goes out to the public. That's not what I want. I want the exact opposite. Whatever is the most opposite of that, that's what I want. And this is the closest thing to that I've found, that's the complete opposite, where there's nobody but me that has a say in this. And even within that one person, I'm cutting as little as possible, and I'm being as true and honest with the people that choose to give me their time as I can be. Right.
Yeah,
and that's the only thing I can promise you. I can't promise I'm going to be right. I can't promise I'm going to be funny or intelligent or entertaining. I hope to be all those things. I really want to, but I can't promise it. But what I can promise you is that it's just going to be honest. It's not going to be influenced by people. I'm truly bringing my thoughts on the conversation and trying to create a space for other people to come on and do the same thing. Right. And I think that's what is going to keep people coming back. I think that's what the strength of Joe Rogan is, right? Like, he has all these big name guests and stuff that bring people in, but at the end of the day, even without all that, they just know that right, wrong, or indifferent, you're just getting what he thinks, right? And you can give whatever weight to that you want, but that's up to you. It's not like you're being lied to or forced into it. Whereas if you listen to almost any other media type apart from podcasting, and I would maybe try and throw YouTube into there, but they're getting so locked down with what they allow that you're self-censoring, so you're not even getting it there either. It's such a small sliver of places where you can get that honest, authentic thing.
Okay, so CBC and then CTV did pretty much the exact same headline. I didn't look into if it had the same byline, because sometimes they share articles where the same person will write an article that ends up getting ran in both places, right? But that big anti-lockdown protest in Montreal this past weekend, and it was reported that there were hundreds that showed up at it. And then even just in the picture, like if I was to just zoom in and maybe just do a little bit of Super Troopers Enhance on this, I'm sure that there's at least 1,000 or 2 people in that picture. And the headline says hundreds. And then somebody on Twitter had put just side by side, which happens fairly often with CBC because they're absolute fucking garbage.
Trash.
Right? So then they had something about, oh shoot, I can't remember what it was. Forgive me, but it was some kind of like the exact opposite idea. It was something that was very obviously a leftist protest. And they talked about how dozens were there. And then you looked at it and there was like 6 people in the picture. And so it's just interesting how, well, I mean, anybody who's ever thought to ask themselves if what they're being presented is true in Canada has issues with the CBC. And it's that same kind of thing where that's getting a reputation for just being excessively dishonest. I mean, look at how Don Lemon handled the whole horse dewormer thing with Joe Rogan, right? And then even just doubling down on it with Sanjay Gupta after the fact. Like this is not somebody who's interested in presenting the news. They're interested in presenting a narrative. CTV just had 2 different versions of a survey that they put up online that said, should Canada institute mandatory vaccination? And then they
already has.
Well, mandatory is kind of a flexible word.
But they get to pretend as if they haven't mandated it by putting bullshit other opportunities that make it sound like it, when in reality it's a mandate.
Well, I mean, it's not coercion, but you don't get to eat or keep your job or you'll be homeless if you don't.
Like, I think technically this is probably illegal, what I'm doing right here, that I left my house and went to somebody else's place, like with what they want to allow you to do. Like,
oh yeah. So yeah, if anybody asks, we're cousins, I guess.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Like,
so, but the thing about it was that the CTV, pardon me, had put up this poll,
right?
Because presumably a fair news organization would want to get the beliefs of people and accurately represent that. And so rather than saying, should Canada institute mandatory vaccination instead of the Harvey Weinstein coercion methods that we've been doing lately, like, well, you don't have to touch my penis, but if you don't, you're not going to have this job.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's something we sent that guy to jail for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But if we say, okay, well, you don't have to get this injection, you don't have to put this inside you, which is probably the same line he used.
Yeah.
But if you don't, you won't have this job.
And not only that, you won't have this job. You won't be able to do anything around where you live. But not only that, we won't let you leave where you live. You can't go to a different country. You can't go to a different...
But CTV took those two different polls down. So they took down the first one partway through because it was overwhelmingly against.
Yeah.
And then they put up a second one, and then they took that one down partway through because it was overwhelmingly against. And here's the thing is, if you are a news organization, you should be reporting on what's actually happening.
Right.
And so if you put a survey out there, you let it go to completion, and then you report on that survey.
Right.
Right? You don't get to decide whether, okay, well, you know what? I don't agree with that news, so I guess it's not going to happen. We're just going to have to say that birds are real.
You know what an even better one than that is? If you're doing testing on a vaccine and you have someone that has an adverse reaction to shot one, and instead of completing that through the survey, you just take them out of the study. It's the exact same thing, but there's no accountability at the end of this. And this is something I want to.
And then if you handpick the people
exactly
on one side of it, and then you just go with whomever on the other side.
Yeah.
Pfizer. Sorry, I think I might have COVID there. And so, that's the exact same thing we're dealing with right now. Where, okay, so you've got a company that is making billions of dollars, and that is contingent on them having a safe and effective vaccine. And you say, okay, you know what? We need you guys to come up with a vaccine. And they say, okay, we're on it.
Yeah.
And then they say, okay, we think we've got it. You say, okay, perfect. You guys do your own investigation. You look into it, make sure it's effective, and just present us with the results, and we're going to trust you.
Yeah.
Does anybody see any issues with that?
Especially with their track record of what they've done in the past with that exact system where we trust them to do it, and they lie, and they know that. And usually you have a couple of years different distance between that where you can kind of get away with it and you can fudge some things you have. Never before has it been so clearly, and not that they brought it out. Whistleblowers came forward and released the information of what they were hiding. And still, people don't seem to be kicking up too much of a fuss.
Well, does it seem a little... Here's the thing is, you start off all these questions with, does it seem a little bit suspicious that? And then you just get labeled as some ridiculous conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
You're like, well, no. I'm not saying it's happening.
Yeah.
Or I'm not saying that it's part of some deep, dark... I am saying it's happening, but I'm not saying it's part of some deep, dark conspiracy. I'm just saying, does it seem suspicious that... And then you talk about this exact thing that happened.
Yeah.
Does it seem suspicious that a virus originated in the same town where they have a laboratory that studies mutations in this exact same family of viruses?
Exactly. And past that there was a DARPA proposal for the exact change to a coronavirus that we're seeing that was so odd
with the spike proteins.
Yeah. And there was a year before, there was a turn down, right? They said, no, we're not going to do this, DARPA, right? That proposed the exact change that we're seeing in reality, and they got turned down. And then a year later, that a disease with that exact change that was proposed to try that out as gain of function comes into the world, right? Like,
yeah. And so, I mean, that's the question.
I have a question or two there.
It's just, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to go down some deep rabbit hole and figure that it's Lizard Man and Illuminati or anything like that.
Just follow what's on paper. You just have to
be able to say, does it seem suspicious? And as soon as you ask that question, you get labeled as some extremist person.
Yeah.
You're like, well, no, it doesn't make a lick of fucking sense. No. And all I'm doing is just saying, does it seem suspicious that you made the exact people who were developing the vaccine that have an absolute ungodly amount of money to be gained from doing it, from having it go through.
Yeah.
And you put them in charge of determining the efficacy of that exact same thing.
Yeah.
And they came back and said it was 100%. Okay, does that seem suspicious? Well, 100% is a pretty high number, right?
Yeah.
You'd think if there was, I mean, yeah, in the most perfect situation, I'm guessing you probably couldn't get past somewhere imperfect. There's just the fact that it was 100.0% is just laughably implausible, right? Okay. So then you say, all right, well, it seems to be dropping off. Okay. And then at the same time, a year ago, our government was bragging about how they got 350 million doses. Well, there's only 37 million of us. Does it seem suspicious that they bought 10 doses for every single man, woman, and child? Especially when you account for the fact that it was only originally given to people over 18, right? I mean, the children thing is a fairly new development.
Right.
So, if you say, okay, if they're going to get everybody vaccinated, you're looking at, I have no idea what the numbers are, maybe like 25 million or something, right? That's how many they should have ordered. Instead, they ordered 350 million.
And even to give them the most charitable sense of it, maybe you even do it double just in case things go wrong, right? They have they have to be kept really cold. Maybe some of them in transport, there's issues with them. You want to have more, but 10 times more? Like now you're getting outside of even the charitable ways of looking at it, of giving them some benefit of the doubt on these, right?
Like there's no way. I get the fact that it's the government doing this, but even the government has a sufficiently capable supply chain to not throw out 900% waste.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so now you've got that, and then the efficacy drops off, and you need a second and a third dose. But it's supposed to be applied over time. So here's the thing is, by all logic, and I don't know, maybe someone feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they keep saying, okay, well, you need your third dose to have any protection against Omicron, right? But it's not whether it's effective against Omicron or not, it's that the efficacy drops off after a period of time. So it would stand to reason that if somebody went in for their first dose tomorrow, then they would be considered fully vaccinated for a window of time. And then afterwards, they would need the second and the third and the fourth, going by their logic. And here's the problem is that when you get going by their logic, you just get tripped up. Because it makes no goddamn sense. There's not a lot of
logic in their logic.
No, there isn't. Absolutely not, right? So it's, okay, is Omicron so incredibly powerful that you need a triple dose? Well, why not just give people all 3 doses at once?
Well, I can think of a couple, right? Like, and there's a lot of reasons, right?
Absolutely, right? But here's the thing is they're not saying that it's a stronger virus and so you need a larger dose in your body. It's that the efficacy drops off after time. So why would you? So there's roughly 10% of people who are completely unvaccinated right now. That 10% of people, by the other people's logic, should be able to go into a pharmacy or whomever, get that first dose, and be considered fully vaccinated through a certain window. According to their logic. And that's where this falls apart, is that every time you say, okay, well, you said this, now how does this work? Then as soon as they get tripped up, all of a sudden you're in everything a phobe denier and an alt-right white supremacist and a tiki torch waving son of a bitch.
And I think it's 2 things, right? The efficacy falling off, and then also just the fact that when you roll out a vaccine to everybody, right? Like there was different ways, and that was my biggest thing. Is like I was definitely pro-vaccine, but I was having issues with the rollout, because now if you roll it out to just the people that are at most risk, right, to the elderly, to the overweight, to the people, maybe even people that are really scared, because you're at more risk if you're that scared, because your immune system's shut down, because you're just in such a place of fear. If you do that, now you have a population where the disease has to mutate and respond within a world where
assuming the vaccine's effective.
Assuming the vaccine's effective, or was as effective if you take it right back to the first time you rolled it out. Now, for the next 6 months after that, the disease operates in a world where when it comes up against people that are vaccinated, they have that protection. But then when they're coming up against people that aren't as much of risk, it's just going through the normal population. Now you roll it out like they did, where now everybody gets it. And now the disease is completely operating in a world where everybody's vaccinated. It is you are setting up the parameters for it to mutate around that, right? And now it's going to get better and better. The more people it can infect that is vaccinated, it's going to get better and better at working around that, right? And that's the entire world you create, right? And now you have...
Better is kind of a pejorative term, though, to be fair. So, like, here's the thing is that, and here's the problem, is that this has become a right versus left thing because people on the left don't understand this. Because when you talk about socialists and career public health servants and politicians, the whole idea of being a parasite is that you don't want to kill the host. You don't want to suck so much life and energy and nutrients and everything that makes that person able to continue living out of them that they're no longer to continue providing you with nourishment. Okay? And people like NDP don't understand that because it hasn't quite gotten to that breaking point where like Greece did a few years ago. But in Canada, you know, there's always more money in the banana stand, and they're always able to get a little bit more. And so they haven't quite been able to kill the host to the point where, okay, well, you know what? There's not more free money for everybody because everybody's left. There's not more money to have ridiculously unsustainable public sector pensions. There's not more money to have affordable housing that's completely ineffectual. And there's not more money for this, and there's not more money for that. We can't just keep shoveling money out to you because there's no more money left. And now we either stay and die or leave and thrive.
Right. And
they don't understand that that's how viruses work, is that they kind of realize it, you know, through the process because they replicate so quickly that their timeline for evolution, for lack of a better word, because that's what you see with the different strains, is basically just the evolution of that organism. And you could argue about how many life functions a virus has and whether it technically constitutes being an organism or not. That's totally aside from the point. The idea is that they realize through those progressive iterations that they need to just back the hell off a little bit or they're going to kill the people that they depend on to survive. And public sector unions haven't quite realized that yet. And so when you're talking to the NDP or the Liberals or PSAC or CUPE or whomever else, they're like, no, let's just lock everything down forever. Let's just do this because this virus is big and scary. Well, you know what? Eventually, the people who pay you to be at home are either going to be at home collecting money beside you or they'll have moved to Florida.
Right.
And so it's a big disconnect where that complete side of the spectrum doesn't have the awareness to realize how things progress.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't disagree with anything you said. That more so what I was bringing up with the vaccine is viruses are mutating all the time, right? They're always trying new things. And if there's
mutating is a scare word, right? It's the same thing with variant, right? Okay, think about...
It's only a scare word if you're made to scare.
Well, no. But the thing about it is you present this all as a scare word. Up until 2 years ago, it wasn't variants. We called everything strains. Yeah. Oh, there's a new strain of the flu.
For sure, but for a new strain or a new variant, there has to be mutation.
So much mutation as it was evolution, right? But you see, mutation, I mean, yeah, you got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but also you've got that, Toxic Avenger that was mutation, right? And so and we talked about this real quick about how the left loves to find the scariest word possible to describe something, right? And so
I don't think that's an example of it, though. I think there's tons of examples of it. I think that's a poor one to hang your hat on because I think that completely take that aside because I don't listen to any of the mainstream media. I listen to like Brett and Heather Weinstein. I have from way before this, and I listen to them and hear them talk. And I'm pretty much completely parroting their words from months ago before the vaccines were even out. This is what they were saying is right. Evolution is mutation, right? Like that is how evolution works is things go along and then there's an odd mutation because that's just kind of how we work, that things are mutating all the time.
Things
and
happen
then
randomly.
if it serves, it stays. If it doesn't serve, it dies off.
And
right?
some random asshole fish decided to crawl out of onto the sand and now I've got to work.
Right. So whatever word you want to use for it, I just think mutation is one of those ones where it is scary and people are scared of it now because of all the things going around it. But at its base, that's not one of those words. It was being used way before all this stuff, right? And so I'm just going to use it because I don't have a better one to make this point that I'm trying to make. Okay. I don't have a better word for it. But the viruses are mutating all the time. We're mutating all the time. Everything's mutating all the time, right? And what matters to that is the pressures around it to matter. If there's a mutation that helps it work around that one small change to the one binding site that the vaccines work on to make it bind less in your body, if there's a mutation that happens that would allow it to, But in the host that it goes to, that doesn't serve it because it's not vaccinated. That doesn't propagate on. That doesn't give it a competitive advantage because it's not there. Now you make a whole population vaccinated. Now there's a selective pressure. There's a pressure for that disease to mutate around that thing that you change, right?
Yep.
So now, but my argument is that instead of just giving the vaccine to the people that are really at risk and giving them to people that are at no risk at all, you're losing efficacy for those people. You are speeding up the time frame for it to evolve around, so that you are losing efficacy that way, right?
Well, life finds a way.
Life finds a way. And so then you have that on top of the fact that it loses efficacy over time, which you are highlighting. So now what's happening is they have already bit the bullet on this. It loses efficacy over time, right? And they know that. So they've kind of already ate that shit sandwich, right? And people
have they eaten that shit
not
sandwich?
Really. They've pretended.
They've acknowledged that it's in front of them.
Sure, yeah.
And then they've gently passed it over to some big bouncer looking guy who has shoved it down our throats.
Fair. Okay, yes. I think that's a much better way to put it, and a very much more what's the word? Visceral, colorful way to put it. I love it. But now with Omicron, right, of what you're saying, they're hiding behind the fact that they're saying you need these boosters because the time frame is effective, because they don't want to admit that the other kind of efficacy that I'm speaking to, that they, with the role, and I'm smacking the table again, I'm getting excited. They don't want to make us eat this other shit sandwich of, not only is it losing efficacy over time and it's not giving you protection for as long, and first it was 6 months and now it's coming down, they're saying even 10 weeks, right? And they're trying to lay that all on the head of this shit sandwich you've already eaten. But there's another one coming of, no, the way we rolled this out is actually making it so it's losing efficacy on a whole different way, right? And that's why with this new disease is now, Delta wasn't very responsive to this, to the vaccine, because it wasn't around when they made it. It is something that evolved to get around it. And now we have more and more that have lived in this world that has completely gotten around it. And they don't want to admit that, because that actually has identifiable ties to the way they rolled it out. There's some blood on their hands for saying that they were so quick to say everybody needs this, when there was lots of really smart people like Brett and Heather Weinstein before the vaccine rolled out to say, hey, we have to be really careful how we roll this out. Mm-hmm. We could be doing more damage to this amazing technology you have. And there's a huge financial incentive to give it to everybody they can. But at the end of the day, that might not be the safest way to roll it out. We might actually be hurting the protection that we could offer to these people that are in real danger, right? That's my point.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that more people need to realize, is that in an effort to look woke and that they're on the right side, we have completely botched the rollout of these things that could be an amazing technology. You have to go into it understanding that the people rolling these pharmaceutical companies are not on your side. They are not ever going to be on your side.
Big Pharma isn't on my side.
Exactly. And I think that's pretty, that
breaking news.
Yeah. That seems pretty obvious to you, but there's so many people that isn't obvious to. But within that, these are the things that will highlight to them when you think it. To guys like me and you, that seems like, how can you not see that? It's so in front of your face. How can't you? But when you can roll it out in ways that it's not just vilifying them completely, it's saying that you can show them with incentives and science that this was on the table and they put money ahead of it. There were really smart people saying that this could be an issue. Nobody knows until you try it. And then it seems like the reality of what is happening is really matching up with what these really smart people were saying before we ever rolled them out. But we didn't even give them the time and space.
Probably why they're really smart, right? And here's the thing is, if you're the smartest person in the room, get in a bigger room, right? And if you've got somebody that is like, look at Robert Malone, and I've been meaning to, I'm going to catch hell for this, but I've been meaning to listen to the Joe Rogan episode for a couple weeks, and I've had a whole lot of other stuff on my plate. I mean, we were just talking, I'm in the process of moving right now. And then I hadn't heard of you until you reached out, and then I had to catch up on that.
Fair enough.
And a few other podcasts that I listen to religiously, like Sean Newman. And so, there's only so much time in a day, and I haven't checked out the Robert Malone yet. But this is a guy who he's ground floor when it comes to the mRNA stuff.
Yeah.
This is a guy that you want to listen to. The Weinsteins, right? Where these are some of the smartest people that you can possibly get. And when it comes to making policy and planning things, if you're in government, you're not going to have, well, especially if you're Joe Biden, but if you're Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Barack Obama or George W. Bush or Hillary Clinton's husband, whatever his face was. Oh, yeah, Bill. Because all anybody remembers at this point is Hillary. It's kind of funny. You can't be an expert on everything. You cannot put together a perfect plan or an optimal plan. And so you've got to have these advisors. You've got to have the smartest people that you can possibly get advising you on this. And that's the thing about this whole shit show, is that none of the emergency preparedness stuff we'd done for pandemics was followed.
Like thrown out.
These were all laid out ahead of time. Okay, all right. So, we've got the glass case football scenario where we just crack this open and we start reading through the playbook that we've laid out for this exact situation. And they open it up and they said, okay, well, it doesn't have enough diversity in it, so fuck that.
Yeah.
We're just gonna break the economy.
Yeah.
And none of that got followed, and there hasn't been any sort of a cooler heads prevailing thing for years. And the interesting thing about Omicron is that it's getting, the data is still kind of coming in and stuff, but Ontario did something really interesting where they started reporting it in terms of cases per 100,000 for being vaccinated and unvaccinated. And they're virtually identical, which tells you that whether you're vaccinated or not, the vaccines have effectively almost zero efficacy at this point, right? It's like, okay, do you know what the longest fence in the world is?
Great Wall of China?
No, not even close. It's in Australia, and it doesn't go all the way across the continent, but it goes a big chunk. And so what happened was, a couple hundred years ago, there was some Englishman who just wanted to shoot a few rabbits. And so he let loose 18 or 36 rabbits in the woods behind his place, so you'd have something to shoot at. Because as if there isn't enough things in Australia to shoot at, and rabbits are going to be the least of your worries, right? Yeah. Well, apparently not, because as invasive species tend to do, it totally took over. And so the Australian government built this huge, ridiculous rabbit-proof fence to keep them all on one side, because they're like, the cat's out of the bag here, but at least we can stop them at this point.
Rabbits out of the bag.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
If you will.
Yeah. I'll allow it. So anyway, I mean, if you think about the vaccine as a very rough simplification as being a fence that the rabbits can't get past on the other side, right? And then these rabbits keep evolving, and successive generations are going to get better and better at jumping over that fence. Right. And eventually that fence is completely ineffectual, useless. Right? Yeah. And we're getting to be at that point. And I think where this whole thing ends, because that's what everybody keeps asking. And I've got this crystal ball thing. I'm trying to, you can see I'm a chess player, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to think a few moves ahead, eventually, like, even people like Justin Trudeau are going to say, well, I still want to be king, but I can't be king of total ashes. There's got to be a little bit left here.
Yeah.
And the really shitty cop-out that I think everybody's going to take is whatever the next variant is after Omicron, Persei, whatever it is, they're probably going to call it Omega, because it's going to be the last variant that we need to worry about. And they've been wanting to call the Omega variant for months. As soon as they started going on the Greek letters, you knew that they were just foaming at the mouth to call something Omega. So anyway, this next variant is going to be even less of a health issue than this one. And we can go back to our normal lives, and we don't have to vaccinate everybody, and we don't have to spend $1 bazillion on single-use plastic disposable rapid test kits, even though we can't get straws in Saskatchewan and Alberta because they're going to somehow end up in the fucking ocean. But we can order $140 million little pieces of single-use plastic that we're told to not even trust the results of. And that somehow is more intelligent money spent, especially from an ESG perspective, which apparently the left is quite big on right now. And so, again, this is just getting tripped up in their logic. So I think what's probably going to happen is that next variant that comes out, they're going to say it's no worse than a minor cold, and the mortality rate is extraordinarily low, and the only people who need to worry about it are people with significant comorbidities and the elderly. And then some people are going to say, okay, well, you know what? Now it's safe. And the reason why we got to that point is because we social distanced and we wore masks and we got vaccinated. And it would have happened sooner if you plebs had gotten vaccinated too.
Yeah.
And then those plebs are going to say, listen, asshole, we have been saying that that's the exact same symptoms of this virus since the first day it fucking started. And nobody is listening to us. And every time we showed you data that showed otherwise, we got kicked off of Twitter and YouTube and got called radical conspiracy theorists. Now the CDC just said that something like 70% of the COVID deaths had 4 or more comorbidities. This is from the CDC.
Yep.
So did they die of COVID, or did they die because they were 83 years old and weighed 426 pounds?
Yeah.
I mean, really?
It's tough.
Yeah. So, I mean, but this is the same stuff that lots of people have been saying this whole time and getting absolutely railroaded over it. And so it's going to bring up, if I'm right about this, which I've been wrong about a great many things, but if I'm right about this, and I think that's what they're going to see as their magic bullet way out. But then the next thing is going to say you're going to have the very self-righteous people who quadruple masks and only had sex through glory holes as per the World Health. Yep. And they did this and they did that and they did it all right. And they were the real heroes in this. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of people over on the other side that said, bitch, you never even looked at the numbers. They've been saying this since day one. Do you honestly think that this is just some super special virus? I mean, yeah, it got created in a lab, so that's a little bit different. But do you think that there's something absolutely amazing about it, that it just managed to evolve into something completely ineffectual over 2 years while every other virus hasn't? Come on.
Yeah, and I think that is the natural trajectory, but I think there's a middle ground there between those two things, because I feel like those two pictures that you painted of those two sides there, I never fell into either one of those, because I was listening to people like Brett and Heather who were saying, yes, what they're trying to paint this as and the fear that they're trying to instill in you is completely not following any science. That is not there. But there's a different type of fear that you should, and enough to take it serious, is the fact that
I'm not discounting the fact that it shouldn't be taken seriously. I'm saying that, like, if you look at PANDA, the pandemic data analytics place out of South Africa, they've said, they're like, just if you look at the data, you can't tell when any of these mandates came in terms of
if they help
COVID numbers. Yeah,
exactly.
So you created big mask companies to go along with big pharma based on absolutely nothing. We've got big hand sanitizer,
which is completely useless for
respiratory disease.
And this specific one, and how it seems to be spreading, right?
Yeah, and then the social distancing and all of the extra hurdles that businesses had to cover.
All the plexiglass that got installed.
Even if they're still open, how many businesses don't even exist anymore because of this bullshit?
Yeah, a good chunk of them, right? Exactly. You know, and but here's where I think we could have got the best of both worlds, because you don't want to, in the service of getting people to be less scared, you don't want them to get into where you just treat it as if it's nothing, because this is what the reasoning I followed, and it allowed me to feel like I was having the best of both worlds. Is, yes, I am not afraid of this disease, because I think I believe everything you hear on, CBC and CTV and all this stuff about what it's going to do to you. Why I didn't want to get the disease, because for the first time in the world, again, I'm smacking the table, you could be infected by a disease that, by my best estimation, was fucked within a lab. And I don't know what that could be, and I don't know.
That's a very valid,
right?
Like, and
that was
the thing about it
the whole time.
is that if that had been the narrative from the start,
exactly,
you would have actually had a lot of people that were not dismissive of it, but dismissive of how over the top places like CNN and CBC were in terms of just trying to pretend that it's something that just piles up body bags.
And it would allow you to take it seriously without all the fear and all the run-on effects of fear, because you cannot discount all the negative downstream effects that fear creates, right? One of the biggest things is nothing is worse for your immune system.
Fear is the mind killer.
Exactly, right? And people don't understand that. And that's where, I see so many people that are trying to do the right thing by trying to dispel that fear by saying there's nothing to worry about. This is just a common cold. They're lying, or this isn't real. Not to say that either of us are proponents of that, but you hear this and it's like, you're doing such damage because now they paint everyone with that brush that they're saying that COVID isn't even real, when it's like, no, there's a middle ground that can say like, yes, you don't need to be scared. You don't need to hunker down in your house for the next 6 years, which I have really good friends. Half the drive down here, I was on the phone with someone who was completely on the other side of it, and we can still get along. You said you were
listening to my podcast on the drive down here.
I listened to
you son of a bitch.
It was half your podcast, half a conversation with that, and I struggle with it. And this is what they said to me, and I take this criticism very strongly because I think they're very right. They say, I want to listen to you, but you get so excited and so animated over this, it's hard to have a conversation. It's like, yes, that is tough, and I take that on because I recognize that myself, and it's probably really hard to have that argument with me because I say like, you know what, like I'm not, if you would have the conversation with me, you would see that I am not all that someone that you think is in my position, this anti-vaxxer, whatever word you want to apply to it, and all the things that come with that, you would see I'm not that at all. Right?
There's definitely people who should be worried about it. There's like, it's not as though this isn't something that's just made up by some shadowy cabal. Mm-hmm. It exists. Yeah. I don't think anybody's disputing that.
Yeah.
And well, okay.
But they're trying to pretend that there's people disputing that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? And it's interesting that I feel obliged to make my position very clear because I don't want to be strawmanned into saying, oh, well, it does. Yeah, Twos was on the podcast and he said that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Or, and then they just kind of discount everything you say because you're some ridiculous science denier, right? Yeah. Quick time out. Now. But yeah, I find it interesting that I feel the need to make my position very clear that I'm not implying that this is a conspiracy theory or anything at all like that, because everybody is just so quick to demonize, like, oh yeah, you're going against the narrative.
Yeah.
The narrative that, oh yeah, you think that the injections are going to put 5G into your body and that all of a sudden we're all going to know Kung Fu. Right?
No. Well magnetized. And
yeah. I don't know if you saw that clip. John Oliver had it on his show because he loves to really pick the extremely stupid people and use them as, parrot them as sort of
as one does,
mainstream examples. Yeah, there's lots of people that do it, but he does it better than anybody else, right? And so, there's this woman who tried to stick like a penny to her shoulder where she got the vaccine in some town hall, right? Yeah, so that's not me. I'm not saying that this isn't something that the right people should be concerned about. I'm just saying that this isn't something we should have decimated an entire generation over.
100%. 100%. And that's exactly where I think the majority of people that aren't following the narrative are saying exactly that. There was a better middle ground that we could have got to. And in all these issues that were big issues before COVID have now been highlighted because of COVID, right? Like so much of what you talk about on your podcast about the corruption and the ineptitude that are within our governmental systems, that was a big issue before this. We've just had a really, really easy life until now. And now this comes to be, and you see what happens when these people like Justin Trudeau, who is, a glorified drama teacher that is in this position where you need to have a leader, and he's the farthest thing from it. And then you get to see the consequences that happen when shit hits the fan and you need somebody in that role, right? Like that's more where my issues lie, and what I've had trouble with is because I've been way before COVID. Have I been the one ringing this bell of we have an issue here? There's complete corporate capture of our regulatory systems and our governmental systems, right? Like,
I don't know if that's totally fair. The corporate capture? So? I don't think the corporate capture. I would definitely say union capture, but I mean, when it comes to corporate capture, look at pipelines.
Look at Big Pharma.
Okay.
Right?
Touche. Right? I don't think of Big Pharma as a Canadian thing because the only ones left in Canada are in Quebec, and that really only counts with an asterisk, right? Yeah. You had a pharmaceutical company in Calgary that packed up shop and moved down to the States because they, despite the fact that they were fully capable of doing vaccine manufacturing, they didn't get the nod from the Trudeau Liberals, presumably because they're not from fucking Quebec, right?
Could be. Yeah.
And so, like, okay, well, you know what? You've got a perfectly viable business. And here's the thing, like, when you look at these big successful business people, typically it's not just one business. They end up getting a few complementary businesses.
For sure.
Because, I mean, it's just integration. If you're going to be paying for a company to brew beer, if you've got a company that brews beer, why not also have a company that makes cans,
kegs.
Right?
Or cans. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Kegs, cans, whatever. But the point is that why take your money and give it to somebody else when you could just take it from one pocket and put it into another pocket, right? And so, shoot, I lost my train of thought with this.
I was going to try and pick it up for you, but I'm not 100% sure where you're going with it.
Okay, well, so... Oh, shit. I don't know. Whatever.
Hey, that happens to me about 3 times a podcast. So don't feel bad. It happens to me all the time. But I think... I got to learn that lesson, and maybe I'll just speak on it myself, and maybe it'll help jog what you're talking about. But that hub and spoke concept of having your main source and then building subsidiaries around that, I got to learn that from a time I was very small, because I got to watch my dad be a businessman, and to see the restrictions around the business he was running, and kind of see the cap of how much money he could make, how successful he could be, how fast, and that there was these opportunities to build subsidiary companies around that would do exactly what you're talking about. That's just good business, right?
Yeah.
And my biggest issue, and I think I apply this, and this is a lens I see everything through, is that there's certain realities of scale that when you get a certain amount of people, when companies get to a certain size, when organizations get to a certain size, where accountability breaks down.
The Pareto problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 20%, I mean, if anybody listens to Jordan Peterson, depending on how deep of a dive you do.
I've gone deep. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'm there
all
with
right.
you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So 20% of the lions have 80% of the sex, right? And 20% of the people in a company do 80% of the work.
For sure.
And 20% of this does 80% of that. And for whatever reason, it's kind of like the golden ratio, 1.618, where so many times it just pops up in nature and in real life and whatever else. 20% of the people pay 80% of the taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Despite how, we say, okay, well, people need to pay their fair share. Well, if they paid their fair share, you'd give them a big refund, right? And so, yeah, it's as companies get bigger, like if you've got a company of 5 people, right? You've only got 4 people that are dead weight, and it's imperfect, right? When you look at that small, right? But
exactly.
But typically speaking, you've got 20% of people in any given company, regardless of the size, unless it's super small, that do 80% of the stuff.
For sure. And you see that happen, and it's very easy to blame the people within the organization when it's something that once you see it and you get to see how widely spread the issue is, you can kind of come at it with compassion, because I think it's easy to see somebody that works for the government. Maybe I'm trying to think of a good example to make this point, and and I'm struggling a little bit without using personal examples that will get me in trouble.
It's interesting. As soon as you start getting real with this stuff, you're like, okay, so this is a great thing to talk about, but I can't because this is my friend, or this is my family, or this is weirdly specific. So I completely appreciate
exactly that. Right. And when I want to talk about companies that I've worked for in the past, there's only a certain few many, and people know who it is, right? And that's the thing, and I would love to talk about, because that's the thing. I want to talk about it, and with complete compassion for all those people that are within it. I don't blame. This is completely what happens when you get a certain amount of people. Human nature is allowed to take effect, right? Whereas when there's small enough people, there's a certain accountability to each other that prevents human nature from taking hold, and these bad things from coming out, these poor parts of our natures from coming to the forefront.
Things don't slip through the cracks.
Exactly. Once you get to a company of a couple thousand people, there's not a lot of
cracks.
Yeah. Exactly. Nothing but cracks. And you see this Pareto distribution of there's an amazing person carrying water for 5, awful, just there to climb the corporate ladder. And unfortunately, it all is designed in a sense that it supports that, right? If you are willing to give up any sort of morals and just climb the corporate ladder, you're going to do better than the person that is possibly carrying all the water for the other people, but that is willing to speak up, that is willing to say, hey, this isn't right. We can't do this. We can't lie to our investors and say that we're going to hit this target when that's not true. Yeah, it makes all of our jobs easier, but I'm not going to be that person. And they get kind of held down, right? And you see this naturally happen in so many areas. Once you do, things start to make a lot better sense to you, right? And nobody wants to be the one that takes it on to themselves, so they push it upwards. So now, if you're a provincial government and you are caught in a rock and a hard place, you have a bunch of really loud people saying, these mandates are decimating our economy. Like, what are you doing? Like, you can't be doing this. And you have this other loud group that's saying, hey, you're killing my grandma. You need to lock everything down. You need to have all this. And they go, I don't want to make this decision because it feels like I'm down if I do, down if I don't. And what they should do. So what they do is they push it up to the next level.
Yep.
So then they go, I'm just going to listen to what the federal government says. Federal government, they're in the exact same position with those same groups of people. And they say, I don't want to make this decision. I'm just going
to pit them against each other.
I'm going to pit them against each other. And I'm just going to say, and my out is we're just going to follow what the science says. And what they're really saying is we're going to follow what the US does. Right.
Yep.
Whatever if it's liberals in Canada, whatever
like Black Lives Matter and Antifa, how big of a deal were they until George Floyd in Canada? Right. And then all of a sudden now we've got rampant racism.
Exactly. And then you see the same thing in the US, and they push up. So then eventually it gets pushed up until you have 2 organizations that are calling the shots for all of the first world, the CDC and the WHO.
Yeah.
Right. And they are dictating, and everybody just gets to back off. Hey, I'm just listening to him. I'm just listening to him. And eventually it gets up to them. You look at YouTube, right? They are completely, with all the people they're banning, they're just saying, we are just supporting whatever comes out of the CDC and the WHO. That is all we're going to allow.
We just don't want to get sued.
Exactly.
And here's the thing. When the World Health Organization goes back and says something completely different than what they said before, and I don't mean completely different, I mean exactly fucking opposite of what they said before. Take masks, for example. There's been a whole lot of them. Do they ban the CDC for contradicting the CDC or the World Health Organization for contradicting the World Health Organization? No. And the thing about it is that they're political entities. You look at the World Health Organization's reticence to even acknowledge Taiwan. Did you see that? Did you see that interview?
I sure did.
And that guy's from Canada.
Yeah. Oh, is he? I didn't realize that. Oh.
Yeah.
So maybe just for the people listening that don't know, because I'm very familiar with that is exactly where I was going to go with this. Do you want to maybe just let people know what happened there, and just so people listening can come along with this ride with us?
So early on
first couple months of the pandemic,
I think it was a British.
I think so. Yeah.
So this bureaucrat from the World Health Organization, whose name eludes me because he's unimportant.
Yeah.
He's actually from Canada, though, was on a Zoom call with this lady from some presumably British news organization talking about everybody's different responses, early responses to COVID, and
who seemed to be doing really well, which countries had really good numbers, and their tactics seemed to be working, which ones didn't.
Exactly right, exactly perfectly. And so then she said, "Well, what about Taiwan?" And then he just kind of froze up for a minute. And
you can watch this, and I tell everyone, go watch this, because it will really drive home exactly the point I'm about to make after this.
Yeah, and so he just freezes for a minute and then pretends like he didn't hear the question and then tries to talk past it, and then she asks again, and then he says, okay, well, and just sort of tries to bluff it real quick, and then she presses him on, what do you think about Taiwan's response, which, if you guys will recall, was very, very positively received in the early stages. It was seen as being highly effective. And so then you just see his hand like slowly creeping up in the bottom of the monitor, and then they get disconnected.
Yeah.
And so then she's just kind of like, well, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And so, this dude was so intent on not even acknowledging the existence of Taiwan as a separate entity that
because, and just to paint the rest of the picture, is Taiwan is a very important issue to China because they have their own sovereignty, and China does not acknowledge that Taiwan is a country. Taiwan is not a country to China. They are part of China. And they want to have their own sovereignty, and it's a big hot button issue with it too. So even to acknowledge Taiwan as a country, he knew that he would be in big trouble because of how.
So this is a guy who works for the World Health Organization, not the China Health Organization, the World Health Organization.
But where do they get their most of their funding from?
And he was so he was so intent on not
acknowledging
Taiwan's existence because he knows that he's going to be in a world of whatever the Mandarin word for shit is.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? And so then it's the same thing with John Cena coming up on Fast 9.
Yeah.
Where he accidentally talked about how nice it was in Taiwan or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he had to do an apology in Mandarin.
For acknowledging its existence.
Yeah. And then he nails it, which is just crazy because he does not look like a guy you would expect to speak multiple languages. And so, yeah, this whole thing where Taiwan, like it's actually so stringently enforces kind of incentivized, I guess would be a better word to put it. You cannot have diplomatic relations with China as a sovereign country if you acknowledge Taiwan's existence. So it's a condition. So any country, Canada, for example, that
wants to do business with China.
Well, and here's the thing is everybody's also intent on like, you've got people who say, well, Taiwan should do its own thing. And people in China that say, fuck that, we're going to decide what Taiwan does. And nobody really ever asks what the Taiwanese people want.
Right.
I mean, I think it's highly unlikely, but it's possible that maybe they want to be, maybe they don't want sovereignty. Maybe they want to be part of China. Maybe they see some sort of, protectionist thing or whatever else, right? There's a possibility there. But whenever this argument's going back and forth, nobody ever actually says, hey, you're in Taiwan. What do you think? Right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the Crimean invasion. So Russia invading the Crimean Peninsula to liberate it from Ukraine or to steal it from Ukraine or however it is.
However you want to spin it, yeah.
And here's the thing is that Russians think it's their or should be theirs. Ukrainians say it's ours on the map, dipshit, leave it alone. And then us and the rest of the world say, oh, well, Russia's evil, so obviously they're wrong. Or some people say, well, you know what? A large part of the Crimean local population is native Russian. Maybe they want to go back. And nobody at any point ever says, well, what if we just ask a couple Crimeans what they want to do?
Right.
And maybe they want to be their own country. Maybe they want a fourth option. Maybe they want to join up with Gibraltar or something, right? Like, who knows?
Right.
But we're all sitting here speculating about what's best for these people, and we never even ask them what they want in it.
Right.
Right? We're all these armchair pundits who give a shit about absolutely every side of this except for the people directly affected by it, which I think is a dick move.
And then we've kind of gone on I think we really did a good job of highlighting that, but to take this all the way back to where I'm saying, so now everybody at the provincial level to the federal level.
Which is a nice way of saying that I went right off the rails.
No, that's good, but I think you have to really to paint that whole picture to let people understand what this is. So now they've pushed all the responsibility off of themselves. They've all backed up. All these major tech companies have all backed off onto two organizations, the WHO and the CDC.
Yep.
And that was just one of the first and the major tipping points to show like, ooh, maybe there's some perverse incentives there. If China has that much influence that a person from the WHO cannot even acknowledge Taiwan's existence in this call, that should be completely apolitical. There should be no political incentives to talk about, oh, they have a good response to this disease. Can we look at it? Can we talk about it to see if we can use that to learn for the rest of us, right? And there's that. There's also looking at the funding of the CDC and the WHO and where they're funded by. A huge piece of their funding comes from big pharmaceutical companies. If you want to look at it country by country, the country that has the most funding for them is China, right? And you look at this, there's so many perverse, and exactly, not even to point fingers, but just, how did you phrase it? Doesn't it seem
suspicious?
Doesn't it seem suspicious that we've abdicated all responsibility up from so many levels to two organizations, and that there's clear perverse incentives for them to be doing the bidding of someone that directly does not have our best interests at heart? And now realize that, and then relook at the whole pandemic from there and all the reactions now. oh, they've locked down, shut down our economy, done all these things, have completely scared the populace, have people hide in their homes, have completely pitted everyone against each other.
Who came out the best in this? In all the different countries in the world?
China,
maybe Sweden, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe this is all a conspiracy by Big Swede.
Maybe.
Right? But, and the funny thing is, this just occurred to me. Those chiseled jawlines. Yeah. The interesting thing that occurred to me while you were talking is that doesn't it seem suspicious that the only Asian country we're allowed to be racist towards and discriminate against is Taiwan?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. I called it a country.
Oh, boy.
Sorry, Xi Jinping.
Yeah, exactly. But like, just to take that and understand how ridiculous it is to have YouTube completely put they're the arbiters of free speech in today's society, and so they're completely at the whim of
the World Health Organization and the CDC. And the interesting thing is that by association, depending on how tightly that gets cranked in, YouTube can't really support the existence of Taiwan.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's just the tip of the iceberg for all this stuff of what can and can't be said. But it's just to recognize of how easily that can happen and how obvious it is. And I know we only brought up a couple examples of funding and that interview where they wouldn't acknowledge it. But there's time after time, there's so many connections when you really look to dig into it, that there's some real regulatory capture happening within the CDC, the WHO, and the FDA to top measures off, not by China. I think that one would be more so by the pharmaceutical companies. The FDA is completely captured by pharmaceutical. They fund like upwards of 50% of the FDA is funded by these pharmaceutical companies that they're supposed to regulate. It's absolutely absurd when you look at it on its face. And then people wonder, well, there's so many things that just don't make sense. But when you put all those pieces together, it really makes a lot of sense. And that's where I've been so frustrated to sit there, because I've done the research to recognize that, oh no, all this makes a lot of sense. And then to people to say, yeah, not a lot of this makes sense, but I'm still very confident that I'm doing the right thing and that I'm on the right side of this, even though none of this makes sense to me. And really, when I try to apply logic to it, like you said, things just go to shit, right? If you try and apply logic at any point, things go to shit, unless you have these other things these other understandings that allow it all to fall into place. And then it goes, oh, okay, now this all makes sense.
Well, I mean, to some extent, yes. I'm not one of those people who likes to wrap things up in a neat bow and say, okay, well, you know what? Here is exactly patient zero as far as where this whole shitstorm started.
Good
right?
Call.
This is,
I think that's important.
I'm not really the kind of person who says Xi Jinping started this whole thing and it was an elaborate attempt or anything like that. Right. I'm not a conclusion drawer. Mm-hmm. I'm more of a question asker, right? And that's where the whole doesn't it seem suspicious that, right?
Exactly.
And so I don't think I'm remotely qualified on any of these subjects, or probably just about any subject in general, to be that guy who's drawing conclusions. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: is if you're asking the right questions, they lead to other ones, and if you're not even acknowledging the existence of those questions, there is something very wrong with your rationale and your line of thinking and where you're going and all of this stuff.
Right. And one of the biggest things that broke my heart, didn't surprise me much, but broke my heart to see, was one of my favorite podcasters. I mean, he surpassed Joe Rogan. Everyone listening to this podcast knows exactly who I'm about to mention, but Lex Friedman, he's just top of the top. I really love what he does and how he does it. You think he
surpassed Joe?
To me, like as my personal favorite, I just think if Joe releases an episode on a day and Lex, I'm probably going to listen to the Lex ones first. He is my guy, and he had on the CEO of Pfizer to talk about these things.
The CEO of Pfizer went on Friedman?
Yeah, and
ballsy.
And Lex is so nice, and
that's the problem.
That's the problem, right? So he had on the head of the NIH. And again, had the same issues, but when he would bring up, same issue with the head of the NIH and the CEO of Pfizer, he would ask these questions in the framework of how worried are you about, he would lay out in his perfect way of laying it out where it's just,
it's very clear,
it's
easy
very
to
clear,
understand.
Right? There's no way to misunderstand it. Yep. And you'd say, are you worried about the perverse incentives that could be leading to corruption? And to it, they both said, I'm not worried about it at all. We have regulatory things in place to prevent this. And to hear that is just like,
And then him presumably, because he does tend to just take people at their word
Yeah,
a bit
yeah,
too
he
much.
didn't push him on.
He was probably like, oh, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Interesting thing, Joe Rogan, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but whenever his bullshit detector goes off, his response is, whoa, wait.
Yeah.
The 17W wait is him saying, somebody just fed me a line of shit.
Exactly.
And I'm going to very gently get them to dig their own hole and maybe point out the fact that is actually incongruent.
Right. And that's exactly what was missing from that podcast. It was beautiful podcast because the head of the NIH and the CEO of Pfizer are not going to go on show because they know that that's what's coming at them. They will go on to Lex, and as disappointing as that was, it was interesting to see because what Lex did do a good job of was highlighting the positives of those people and the good work that they have done. Because like I said, when you get to organization this size, it's easy just to demonize them all and to lose track of the amazing people that are doing amazing work within them.
Think about all of the families of illegal immigrants that depend on the yard work that CEO's house requires.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. I was more thinking of the amazing, like, as much as I have issues with this vaccine, mainly the rollout of it, mainly the lack of transparency, the lack of conversation around just talking about it and if it's safe and to talk about adverse effects and all these things. It's still amazing that they were able to make a vaccine that works shittily, but even as good as it does, to even have anything that they can do in a year is an amazing feat of science, right? To me.
We've got a vaccine that doesn't fucking work to fight against a doomsday virus that doesn't fucking work, and they both seem like they were made in China. Like, we've got a doomsday virus that works like shit.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Maybe it was made in China just on its own.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but this is what I love about Lex Fridman is he knows all this and he still wants to give the flowers to those people that are doing amazing science, because the issues with Pfizer is the CEO, the guys at the top, the guys in the boardroom, right? Those are the ones that are fucking it up for everyone. You think, so now those CEOs and those guys in the boardroom go to the really, really smart people below them and say, hey, we need this, and you do the best you can, and this is what they give you. Yeah, obviously it's going to be shit because you gave them a time parameter that is almost impossible to meet, and they were able to give you something. That's amazing that they were able to do that. And those people are not bad people for trying to do that, right? They gave them the best they could. Now, when they take that, they lie about what they would. They run the studies to test it like shit. That's where it all breaks down.
And here's the other thing: like anything else in the world, you buy a car, and it's a piece of shit. Well, cars are tricky because it's hard to return them. So bad example. Let me just backtrack that completely and say something like a couch or a blender.
Okay.
You buy a blender.
Yeah.
And it's a piece of shit. And 3 weeks later, you take it back and you say, this hunk of junk doesn't work for crap.
Yeah.
They say, you know what? I'm sorry. Here's a second one that we'll give you. All right. And then even if that one's junk, you can take it back and they'll say, well, we'll give you a third dose of the blender.
Right.
All right?
Right.
They don't say, okay, well, you know what? I'm sorry to hear that. We'll sell you another one. We'll sell you another one.
But that's not the blender engineer who is tasked to design a blender in 3 days and put it out to market. It's
that's
the people,
fair.
Right? Like that. And,
okay.
And in the same way that by completely taking away conversation about it, adverse effects like the economy, like mental health, get completely
myocarditis. Did you even know what myocarditis was a year ago?
I did, yeah. But
okay,
I think
I think a lot of people probably are in the same boat.
That's what I was gonna say. I feel like I'm a weird dude. I'm just into weird things, and I know these things.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I know, right? Like I don't think I'm standard with this, but. Oh, how do I make this point? I feel like it's very important to make it. What I loved about Lex doing that and giving those certain flowers, even though I'm with you on all this stuff and I want to, but I think it's important because in the same way that by going so gung-ho into the vaccines being the only option, you miss out on all these adverse effects for the economy and all these things that didn't get taken into account and are really detrimental. I think the same thing can be flipped for our side of the stance that we're on, is that if we don't take in the effects of giving the flowers to the amazing parts of it, we can do some real harm, because the issues is not with the scientists that make they did the best that they could, and then it was given to these shitty business people that lied about it and rolled it out like shit. And the negatives of that, of changing people's perceptions to be, so now this new wave of people could completely discount vaccines as a whole. And now people can stop taking their mumps.
There's going to be huge ripples with this.
There is, and that's what I'm saying. And I feel like that's what Lex was trying to do, is to try to separate that out and to hold people's feet to the flames that need to. And obviously, we've already covered that he's not the best person for that job because he is so kind and so nice and wants to see the best in people. But that is a really important role, is that if we, in an effort to at all costs show the hypocrisy and the danger of what has happened and what has happened with these vaccines and all the stuff that me and you both agree on, we could be adding unforeseen consequences in the future for people to not understand that this is not an issue with vaccines. It's not an issue with science. It's an issue with giant corporations getting hold of all this power so that they can do whatever they want with them, right? Because now if people stop taking their measles vaccine and measles comes back, that is not a good outcome. There's going to be a lot of undue suffering for that reason, right? And I know that maybe doesn't seem as important when we spent 2 years just being hammered by these people and just being under their foot. And
this is the unintended side effects or the unintended consequences. Right. This is rule, or this is the second level of economics, right? Okay, you want to install affordable housing for people. All right. Well, what happens after that?
Yeah. What's the trade-offs? Everything is a trade-off.
Yeah, everything is a trade-off. Okay, so you mandate that if you're going to build, you've also got to build these affordable housing, right? Okay, well, now the profitability on the entire project goes down, and you marginalize the people who are trying to make a go of it and support the big evil corporations. Yeah. And so, what are the ripple effects? Okay, and what happens after that? And what happens after that? And what happens after that? And when you've got this, here's the thing, is this 10% of people who haven't got the vaccine yet, there's basically one way that they're going to get the vaccine, and it's by drone strike.
Yeah, no, for sure. I see what you're saying, yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
And so now instead of, let's say it was 10% to begin with, right? Now, there's also going to be people that empathize with them as well, right? And there's going to be, people that would have just said, okay, well, I would have never got this, but you had me over a barrel. Yeah. And so for everything else, all that trust in the government, the trust in these institutions, it is never coming back. And the best they can hope for is that maybe those people's children will have been too young to remember this when it happened, and maybe they'll have their trust later on. But here's the thing, is you've got this entire nothing sized population that is never going to believe a fucking word the government says ever again, that is never going to believe anything the World Health Organization says, because in practicality, they have been crying wolf a lot. Yeah.
And
right?
Even if you just take like what is provably like all the times that they stood on that hill that they were going to die on about certain things, like the lab leak theory, what are a couple of the other ones that the vaccine is going to protect you from catching and spreading, right? That honestly, that lockdowns work, that masks work, that
social distancing worked.
Social distancing was, I have a real issue with social distancing because it was an attempt to infantilize a really important message that needed to be spread. What needed to be spread with the respiratory virus is you need to understand how respiratory viruses spread. Air density, right? Like that we're in a room like this, like where there's some decent, what would, if we wanted to be as safe as we could, right? We would open a window, we would put in HEPA filters, there's things like that. Instead of trying to spread that message, they said, people are too dumb, they won't get that. So what we're going to tell them is social distancing. That is the lowest common denominator, the dumbest thing. That doesn't work, right? Because there's a much better way to teach them. And that did harm, because if you would have just treated people like adults and said, hey, 6 foot distancing, that doesn't matter. If you're 6 foot distance in a fucking 6x2 room, right? 6x6x2, like where there's not that much square footage, it doesn't matter if you're 6 feet apart, you're breathing the same air. If you're 6 feet apart in a fucking warehouse, it doesn't matter. You can be right beside each other. It's air density, right? As long as you're not spitting in each other's mouths. But that was the issue there.
We're not doing that today, by the way.
What's that?
Spitting in each other's mouths.
Well, we'll see how they're got a couple more beers in me. We'll see.
Right. Okay. Well, all right. Actually, you know what? That was really, I didn't mean to kill the mood here.
Yeah. I know where you're going. Okay. So but that's what I'm saying of some of these issues. And I think that's a point that we should really emphasize there is I think that's probably the best example I can give of it. But at so many points throughout this is they treated people as children, and they're too stupid to understand this. Like, yeah, this is a complex issue, but
this is not a new thing, man. No. Like, this is all right. You look at any the SNC Lavalin thing. Okay, well, we're not going to let the public know what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's is the treat playbook. Us like fucking children. Mm-hmm. The Danforth shooting. We're not going to let the public know what happened. Biggest mass shooting in Canadian history, absolute fucking shit show from the RCMP. As far as I'm concerned, everybody above a constable on that whole side of the country should probably be fired over that. Okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. What was the We Charity thing? Mm-hmm. All right. You know, and the list goes on and on where all of the various sex scandals in the military, George Chahal, with the whole stealing of flyers and stuff before the election and trying to tell people how to cheat the system and get CERB. Swept under the rug. I mean, this rug is getting pretty fucking big. And it's here's the thing is I totally appreciate what you're saying about them treating us like children regarding COVID. I'm saying that it's not that they're treating us like children regarding COVID. It's the fact that they don't ever treat us like anything else. And it doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether it's the secret Calgary bid for the Olympics that he was mad that everybody found out about before the public vote. Yeah. Nenshi a few years ago. Basically, just the cat got out of the bag that they were trying to get the Olympics into town. And he was mad because everybody found, he wasn't mad that everybody threw a fit. He was mad that everybody found out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then federal politics, the Sky Palace, classic.
I don't think I'm that familiar with that.
Okay. So 2013, 2014.
All right.
Then Premier Alison Redford had commissioned basically a penthouse suite in downtown Edmonton for her and her daughter because they didn't presumably want to, do one of the usual things that people do, like pay for their fucking domicile. Yeah. And so, hey, you know what? If I'm the premier of a province that's making a shit ton of money at the time, despite how poorly I'm doing things, and our party's been in charge for, 35 years at that point or whatever it was. Right. Well, fuck. Who's going to say no? Who's going to care? Right? And so then word got out that she was building this ridiculously opulent mansion on the top of a skyscraper in Edmonton.
Yeah. People had a few things to say, I would imagine.
Yeah, so that was the end of her political career, right? And then it's actually still in use today. That thing where Jason Kenney and a few of the UCP cronies got filmed on a rooftop, having drinks together, despite the fact that there was all these mandates in place and the social distancing and the mask wearing and the restaurants were closed. Oh yeah, but this is okay because it's us. And this isn't just regular patio furniture. It has the sheet on top, the whatever, right? Yeah. Anyways, the point is tablecloth. Yes, thank you. So the point is that, all right, well, it doesn't matter because we're fancier. We're better than you. So, of course, we can do this. And then he did it in the Sky Palace because he's a fucking out-of-touch idiot. Like the thing that was a hot button that was big enough to ensure the political demise of three premiers before that. Yeah. And he's going to take the chance on getting filmed there, disobeying his own fucking rules, right? And so...
out of touch.
But just treat us all like children. So anyways, circling back, so the Sky Palace thing was something that was done more or less in secret. And then when the information got leaked out that they were spending how much fucking money on this place? Yeah. Oh, and no, how much of it's her money? None of it? Okay, well, that's a great territory, but we need a little bit of accountability here. Yeah. And that was her political demise. And so this whole thing of treating 37 million people like mushrooms. Like Jody Wilson-Raybould has said on the record multiple times that there was a lot more about the SNC Lavalin thing that she wasn't allowed to disclose. Right. And God, I wish she had,
Yeah.
right? Even
Yeah.
like, regardless of damn the consequences.
Exactly.
I don't think that she would have been actually prosecuted for following through with standing up and saying, this is what's right. And I'm going to tell everybody what happened.
Yeah.
And if you want, you can try and throw me in jail, you sanctimonious prick.
Yeah.
Right. But, yeah, so that aside, like there was a lot more to it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it never got disclosed. Harper had been investigated just to make sure things were on the up and up a few times over the years. And he always waived that. He's always like, yeah, just anybody involved, you can tell as much or as little as you know.
Yeah.
By all means. And Justin Trudeau was like, fuck that. You're not saying a fucking word.
Yeah.
Idiot. Which isn't probably the best thing to do to...
Is that leadership, right? Like that's what I come back to so much of the time.
So there's
this
so many
leadership?
different definitions of leadership, right? And there's different leadership styles, different leadership methods. I would say that leadership in general is too fluid of a thing to talk about, but you could say, is this effective leadership? And the problem is that effective leadership and effective political longevity in this day and age are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you stand up there and you take ownership, I think there's a lot of appetite for it in niche markets. But as far as the masses go, if Trudeau was to stand up there and just be like, hey, you know what, I fucked up. So it turns out that masks don't work. And I'm sorry, guys. I had been under a lot of pressure from the Chinese government at the time. They built a statue for my dad and donated a lot of money to my foundation. And I kind of felt obliged to just push this whole bullshit narrative forward. And they made a lot of money. Can you forgive me? Right? We'd be like, we have been telling you that you've been doing that for years. Get the fuck out, prick. Right? Yeah. But here's the thing is that in terms of coming clean, maybe not letting it go to that level, but in terms of coming clean and owning your mistakes and not just saying we have lessons to learn and we need to learn about why it's not great to go surfing on Truth and Reconciliation Day, even after we made the holiday for us. That's not you owning up to a mistake.
No.
And that's not effective leadership. But that is how you still keep your job if you're Justin Trudeau.
Right. Yeah. I think I just see it a little bit differently. And maybe this is a little bit of my inner Lex Friedman, where I see the good in it, and I'm a bit of an optimist in this way.
In surfing on Truth and Reconciliation?
No. In that there is a space for somebody to come in with honesty, right? Like, whereas I think the political system is set up to pull those people out. If you're not going to be playing the game, you're not going to ever make it to that point. But if someone could...
Do you know who Jeremy Farkas is?
The name sounds so familiar, so I must. Farkas. No.
Okay. Mayoral candidate in Calgary here. So we've got this new lady, Jody Gondek, who honestly, I think she would have to just start taking steroids if she wanted to start fucking up the job more than she already is, despite the fact that she's only a few months into the job. Okay. So there was a guy who came in city council 4 years prior to this election, and he was campaigning years before this, Jeremy Farkas, and he just said, my local councillor is garbage. He's unaccountable. His expenses are through the roof. He doesn't look after what people are interested in.
Sounds like someone I know conveniently well in the Slave Lake area. I don't know. I never met the fucking guy.
You mean Pat Rain?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with that after. Anyway, sorry, I didn't even do that yet.
Let's talk about that in 2 minutes. Okay. So anyway, this guy shows up on the scene who is, well, he's a white dude, but he's homosexual, but he never made a big deal out of that, right? Despite the fact that usually people who tend to just throw that around as like a reason to vote for me. I think he was in like the third year of his 4-year term before I even found out. And it didn't make a difference to me one way or the other. What I liked about the guy is that he fought for the interests of the people who elected him. Yeah. Right? And
as everybody should be doing. And that shouldn't be that
shouldn't be controversial.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
like how weird is that? Yeah. What an alt-right extremist that he would just represent the interests of the people who voted for him rather than going along with the status quo and continuing to grind the city into fucking oblivion. Well, no. So this guy shows up And he's constantly getting kicked out, and votes are going 12-1 against.
Yeah.
And he's just in this constant state of being an absolute outlier, because he's just like, I don't care if you like this.
Mm-hmm.
I care about if those people like this.
Yeah.
And that was his thing. And he even said, so Calgary has this thing where you get a ridiculous gold-plated pension, even if you only serve one term. Excuse me. And so he just said, I'm turning down the pension. And I can't remember the exact value he attributed to it after, because he ran for mayor after this very successful term of bringing a lot of awareness to how broken things were. Not necessarily successful in terms of changing things, because he was one voice in a room of a dozen people, but really did a great job of pointing out everywhere that things are broken. Like, the guy is just he's my brother, man. I've never met him, but God, I'd love to shake his hand someday. And so anyway, then he runs for mayor, and there's this public action committee that spends something like $1.6 million propping up Jody Gondek. Well, where did the PAC get its money from? The unions. So the thing about it is that unions can't spend a lot of money, just like corporations can't spend a lot of money. But what you can do is this loophole where you're just like, okay, well, we're going to form this organization, and we're going to give them all the money. And then this organization that isn't the union spends all the money that they got from the union. And that's okay, because, hey, what is politics without loopholes? And so here's the thing is, when it comes to union negotiations, you've got the interests of the taxpayers up against the interests of the union, right? And so, and even if you think, okay, well, I'm not a taxpayer, I rent, so I don't pay property taxes. Well, no, your property taxes are built into what you pay for rent. They're not just volunteered up by your landlord, right? So regardless of where you are in this, if you live in that municipality, you are a taxpayer, right? Okay, so you've got the interests, because the interests of your elected officials should be to get as fair a deal for you as possible, and the interests of the union should be to get as fair a deal for the union workers as possible,
right?
Okay, so you have to be suspicious when you say, okay, well, the union just spent $1.6 million getting this person elected. Okay? Do you think that if you had to guess, like, doesn't it seem suspicious that?
Yes.
Right? And we just keep coming back to that. So anyways, this is the same woman who voted herself a pay raise like 2 months into taking over the helm of mayor, and then also tried to tack
on the mayor of Calgary anymore?
Oh, she's still the mayor of Calgary.
But no, Nenshi, wasn't he the mayor for
so
15 years?
Nenshi, I think he did 3 terms, so 12 years.
Yeah, because that's the only guy I think of when I think of Calgary.
Okay, so this lady's new, and
she won up against
up against Jeremy Farkas.
Jeremy Farkas, that's
who was everything that you want in a politician. But he didn't have the funding of the unions behind him, which is weird, because here's the thing: is if you want to have responsible use of your tax dollars, you should not want the union to be involved.
Right.
It's the same argument with, okay, well, we need to get big corporate donations out of politics. Perfect. Well, we need to get union donations out of politics
100%.
because it needs to be as clear of all of that obfuscation as possible, and it's not. And so anyway, this guy was just an absolute, he was everything you wanted in a politician, and he got beat out by big union dollars.
Which is a story as old as time, really.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
right?
that is the mechanism that keeps the Ken Rutherfords of the world from getting into those positions of power where they could make the change, right?
Oh my God, we should talk about Ken Rutherford for like the next 3 hours. I love that man.
I completely agree, and he's of this journey of finding this podcast and the cool people that I've got to come in contact with. Of all those people, he's one of the probably at the top of the list of the coolest and most just the people that I look up to and that I idolize in the way that he operates his life and what he donates his time to and the values that he holds, right? And what breaks me is to see a guy like that, they would never let him get to the point where he would be, like provincial governance, federal governance. They have so many systems in place that keep people like that have actual values down, right? And I shouldn't say this because before you went on that tirade, I was going to go down a much different route where I think there is room for that because
there's room for that bullshit union buying.
This is the thing. What I think is, I think they're digging their own grave. And this is going to be a weird way, and it's going to get kind of roundabout, but I'll get back to it. Is yes, there's so many of those things. That's just one of them, right? There's so much money in politics, whether it's unions, whether it's big corporations, whether it's all these things, right? Just the power of the parties themselves, and that they have interest and they have these really long-term agendas of what they want to get done. And if you don't match up with that, they're going to make it as hard as possible to keep you out of that. There's so many things up against you. If you're a person like you or me, or like this Farkas guy, or a guy like Kenny Rutherford that really doesn't care about any of that. He cares about people and wants the best for them, right? Because of that, I think it creates a need, right? When you completely segregate off the market from something that is there, and that there's a genuine want for it. As the populace, people are going to want that. You leave the door open. And what it's going to take is someone to find the new social media, right? To someone that gets a podcast. And I know people are going to just laugh in their cars listening to this because I think podcasting is the solution to everything.
Everything. Yeah. Right? Well, I mean, if all you got to hammer, everything looks like
everything
a nail,
looks like
right?
a nail. And I hope that that's not what this is, but I think because of what I already spoke to, of what I think the power of a podcast is that it is so obvious. If it's you bringing your ideas forward, it's very obvious. If there's other things at work, it's very hard over a long period of time, unless it's something like yours. Not to say there's anything wrong with yours either, but when you're scripting it, you can make it sound however you want it to make it sound. Mm-hmm. When you're just, right, going into this, did we talk about what we were going to talk about before? Not really, right? Like,
No. If we haven't even touched on it.
Right, exactly. Right? We've kind of gone on our whole different way.
I would say, though, that I think you get a pretty decent indication of what my values are by listening.
Right. But the power of a podcast is it shows exactly how your mind works, what your values are, and if you have anything that is disrupting that or has undue influence on that, it's going to come through sooner or later, right?
I've got a few things that I am very, very passionate about that I want to work into some kind of a future episode. And I'm really taking my time just rolling them around in my head because I'm very... I've got some extremely strong opinions on some stuff that come from a personal level, and I want it to come across as very, very good. And I don't want to take the chance of just losing my attempt to get a message across.
Hitting a ground ball when you know there's a home run waiting.
There's an absolute home run there, but you really got to see how it comes together, at least as far as my perspective goes, because I could easily flub it up where I just sound like some guy who's just angry.
Right. For sure. And I think that is, but that's the thing. I think it's, again, this is tough to say within how you do things because you have the ability to decide on what you're going to say beforehand. And I think if those things were to come out in a thing like this, you might not do it correctly or as good as you wanted to do with it, but people would never be able to attribute things that you don't believe to it because it'd be there themselves. Or maybe you messed up on the first time, but you get to have more cracks at it after where you could show. And over time, it's going to show exactly what you mean and how you mean it, right? It's going to come out. It all comes out in the wash, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I think is going to be so powerful, that when people can recognize that and bite onto that, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at the competition. There's going to be people that are genuinely behind people like Kenny Rutherford, right? Like
I wanted to move just so I could vote for him.
Exactly. Me too. And that's exactly it. And that gives me hope because sure, there's a million different hurdles in between that and what he's running for there versus where the real effects and change can come in. And there's so many things up against us, but I don't know, maybe I'm just endlessly optimistic, and I just think deep down that there's space for it. But I do think that somebody like, and again, this is going to be American because, like I said, I follow American politics way more. But someone like a Jocko Willink, I don't know if you know who that is.
The name's familiar.
Yeah, the name's familiar. Someone like him, someone like Tulsi Gabbard. Do you know Tulsi Gabbard? Right.
Okay, here's the interesting thing, right? So, Democrat, I love her. I think she's wonderful.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Like if she had been vice president instead of Joe Biden, or pardon me, president instead of Joe Biden, or even VP instead of Kamala, right? Because she mopped up the floor with Kamala in the primaries.
Because she's not beholden to all these things, and she is actually who she says she is, right? And they hate it, and they are so scared of her and trying to tear her down, and trying to call her a Russian asset. She fucking fought for her country for how long she did tours of duty. Like, you want to call her a Russian asset? Hillary Clinton called her a Russian asset. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, Hillary Clinton called everybody a Russian asset, that's right?
That's
like basically it's like,
that's true. Yeah.
Here's the flow chart.
Have
you been murdered by Hillary Clinton? Yes or no? Yes, that's it. And no is then you're a Russian asset.
Okay,
right?
That's fair. But that's what I'm saying of like what was most highlighted to me by all those attacks, and it wasn't just the Russian asset. They were trying any single thing to attack her when there's nothing to attack and they're making things up. But that is exactly the point of, I think they're digging their own grave. When you try and attack someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who is so clearly who she is.
Yeah.
You really, you're throwing away your own accountability, your own
integrity and accountability.
Yeah. You're chipping away. You're taking the axe to your own legs, right? Yep. And eventually that's going to fall.
Well, I mean, she stepped back from the spotlight now, but I don't think she's gone. She's too good at this to be gone forever. And she's perfect. She's extremely intelligent. Yeah. She's gorgeous. So she plays well in front of the camera. And, she's a vet. She's from Hawaii. And she is, although she's still really fair-skinned, she's technically, I think she's a little bit Samoan or something like that. I can't remember, but some sort of a minority. So she checks all of the boxes.
All of their boxes that shouldn't matter for shit,
boxes,
really.
Right? Yeah. Except for they don't give a shit if anybody's a veteran or not, because they don't care about that kind of stuff.
The only box they care about is, are you compromised to go with the narratives that we want to put in front of you? Are you going to
shut up and peddle what we're selling?
Exactly. Right? And that's the one box she doesn't check.
And that's exactly it. But when they try and sell to the public, that's the box that they need to check, with the exception of Nancy Pelosi, who is kind of like the
Wicked Witch of the East.
Yeah, she's basically what Trudeau is going to be in 80 years.
Yeah, about that. Yeah,
maybe 90.
And yeah, the biggest thing with Pelosi and a million other things, but big one that lately is just itching my balls in a way that I can't. No, it's not. I mean, that too. But here's the thing. Investing and making money. And when they know at this point that every time a new variant comes out, there's going to be an effect on the market. And it's up. There's people that are going to make a decision of when they call, because it's not like something, a
You're going to talk puts and calls right now?
I'm not, but more so what I'm saying is there's somebody that gets to decide, right? Like the day they brought out the news of Omicron and everyone lost their shit. That was a decision, right? Like it had already been circling. They had awareness of it. That they could have made that 3 days earlier. They could have put that press release out. But there's a certain section of people that know that. And not only do they know that it's coming, they know the date. And they can do everything they can to get their finances in order to take advantage of that. Yep. And that is the biggest thing to me. Like when they get to decide when they crash the market and they have the ability to benefit from it. And this is not, and I'm not trying
That's
to.
That's why Nancy Pelosi has been a career politician who has a net worth of over $100 million.
Exactly.
For the rest of us, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market when it comes to retirement planning. For people like her, it's, I know that this is going to happen on Thursday, so I'm going to sell this and I'm going to buy that, and then I'm going to flip it on Friday.
And she's the biggest example, but in the same.
So it's a huge arbitrage,
right? But my biggest thing too is that it's not just Nancy Pelosi and it's not just the Democrats. It's it's everybody of a certain level, and that's where my argument always needs to come back to. It's broken. Does it? There's this.
Somebody else said this before once, but. We need to drain the swamp.
Yeah, exactly. And this is my biggest thing of there was the island's on fire and there's this one lifeboat that you can get off with. And it is this drain the swamp idea, this idea that it's all corrupt and we need to sneak in a non-politician at the last minute to come in and actually do that, right? And that was always there, right? That was the only option other than violent revolution to change the whole thing. And that's never an option. You never want to turn to violence. The only other option is to, right? Is
never say never.
I don't know. I'm just one of those guys. I feel like the people that turn to violence as the option do not understand violence. And I think that is true for so many people. And I think that is where, when you talk to people like veterans, like MMA fighters, like who else would be experienced with violence? Maybe police officers to a certain extent. They have a different idea because they've actually tasted violence.
Okay. I think you're framing the setup a little bit wrongly, though. I completely agree with you. But let's say that the overwhelming majority of Canadians decide to storm Ottawa and just stand there and say, you're not in charge anymore.
Right. But that to me is not violence.
Well, that gets followed by violence, right? This isn't going in and punching Trudeau in the face.
Right.
This is people going in and saying, you do not work here anymore. Get the fuck out. And then that gets responded to
with violence.
Violence. That's how it is inevitably a violent revolution. But that doesn't mean quite the same thing as people going in and just being like, like the Antifa people, you see the videos of them getting their asses kicked, right? Have you ever seen any of those?
Like, I've seen tons of Antifa stuff. I just like, in what sense? Like, I just need a little bit more. Help me out.
Oh, well, just, those people who they're just like, oh yeah, we're going to go in there, we're going to kick some ass. And then they try and bring a baton to some giant, like 250-pound dude.
Okay, so like that
who just knocks him right the hell out. That Australian guy who just ran through the police officers, like obviously an Aussie rules player, right?
Yeah. Or like that perfect video of the Antifa guys talking to those two guys and they're having a conversation. The guy turns his head and the guy goes to sucker punch him, and the guy beside him catches his fist in the air and it looks at and just starts laughing. I'm like, hey, you didn't want to hit him until he turned his head, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen that.
Exactly that.
Okay,
right?
so
that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how at some point there's just going to be a bunch of people that are just going to stand up and say, this doesn't work for me anymore.
Right.
And you're not allowed to represent me because you haven't been representing me for a long time. And they're going to say, well, guess what? We've got the guns because we took them all. Right?
Yeah.
And that's when things get violent. But that's a violent revolution. But that's not instigated violence. And I think there's a very important distinction there.
Right. Okay. So, sure. And okay, so my point still stands that is one option, and that is always going to be an option, whether you call it a violent revolution or a revolution that inevitably is met with violence, so becomes violent, but is not inherently violent itself, right? That is kind of one string of events that could lead to the change that we need for this corruption to be taken out. The other thing that I always saw was that there was a way. And again, I'm bringing it back to Brett Weinstein. Brett, he had this idea, and it was called the Unity Project. And after this, you should really look into it. And it was really getting into the swing when I first started my podcast. And I was really highlighting it because it was that lifeboat to sneak in under the guise of night and get a third candidate on the books, which sounds funny in Canada because we have more than two political parties, but it's just an outsider.
In the States, that is a huge deal. And you know what? It would make a world of difference. First past the post is an absolute travesty, and it needs to stop. Keep going. Yeah. I got some thoughts about Alberta on this when you're done.
Okay. So what I always thought of, and what I thought Brett highlighted amazingly with this Unity Project, was he was going to take someone from the left and the right. Right, Tulsi Gabbard was one of the big ones from the left that we're going to put in. Have them go for you flip a coin for which one's going to be president, vice president. It doesn't matter because we're just representing the will of the people and a different thing. And our whole goal is to get the corruption out of it and get money out of politics, to make all these changes for the future, to actually bring this out of the hands of special interest groups, unions, big pharma, military industrial complex, all these people that are currently calling the shots. Doesn't matter right or left, whoever gets in, it doesn't matter because they're the same people that are actually calling the shots. That's what I mean by corporate capture. To me, that's what I see, right? And there was this one lifeboat left of sneaking someone in, of an outsider. And as much as people had issues with Trump and what he was to the people, my biggest issue was that he took that lifeboat, hopped in it, sailed it to the presidency saying, I am that person that's going to drain the swamp. I can do that. Got in, took our lifeboat, of the last kind of option we have to sneak someone in, and completely fucked it. Didn't drain the swamp. Was exactly what everyone else kind of. Maybe to a degree, he was maybe less so just your typical politician. But really, at the end of the day, he didn't do everything he promised on. But now the boat's gone because now everybody.
It's never going to happen again.
But now, exactly, because now when you bring up this idea of sneaking in an outsider, go, oh, you're trying to get another Trump in there, right? Because that's what everything's met with. And now it has completely made it radioactive. This idea that was the last bastion, our last hope of it was like a peaceful coup, right? Of that idea of getting an outsider in. Now they're on guard for it, and it will never happen again. And that is my biggest issue with Trump. Just completely aside of what it was, right? There's so many other things you could discuss on it, but to me, that was what broke my heart. Was there was one last ditch effort that we as a people had to regain democracy, right? Because right now it's pretend democracy. It's not really. It doesn't matter who gets voted in. The same people are in charge, right? And it's not the people you're voting for.
Nope.
And there was only one way to change that, other than what we just discussed of a violent option, which I'm just who I am. I'm a Lex Friedman at heart, right? I don't have that in me. I'm not that Joe Rogan. I'm not that person. And I know that. And yeah, it just broke my heart. Like, that's what I think people need to understand. And hopefully by understanding that, we can take some of that radioactivity out of that again and understand that, yeah, Trump lied about what he was trying to do with it, but that doesn't take away the significance and the reality of what that could have been.
Let me disagree with you very slightly here.
100%.
All right.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Trump was imperfect. He wasn't all bad. He wasn't all good. Mm-hmm. I will say, though, as far as the draining the swamp stuff goes, the fact that both the Democrats and the Republicans were so united in their wanting to get rid of him, I think is probably a lot more telling. See, here's the thing. Was he effective at it? Did he actually drain that swamp?
Yeah.
No. But when you've got
so much
these
up
people
against
that haven't agreed with each other on what color the sky is for the past 50 years, uniting against him as a very principle, that tells me that he was probably making a lot more headway than we realized.
And that they were scared of the promises that he was making, right? And that they're scared of that ship that they saw him sailing in on. They go, oh shit, that's the ship that sinks us all, right? That little rowboat that he came in on, stolen or not, right? Of who I would rather have taken that ship and done this action. But I think you're right to say that maybe I'm not giving him the full,
props that he's due.
Props that he's due, because I think you're right that is, it is hard enough to get in there, but now to have the entire system but I think that was highlighted exactly what I'm saying, is that was the proof in the pudding.
Well, okay.
That they'd all come together like that.
How many shows have you seen where there's some rookie cop that goes into a precinct and he's the only guy that's not on the take?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so now, even if all those other cops don't get along, maybe they're in different parties, but they all unite against him.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, he didn't get to have that epic showdown where he shoots them all on top of some half-constructed skyscraper.
Right.
But still, the fact that they all united against him, I think, is probably quite telling in his attempts. And the other thing that he never gets any credit for is his huge work with the U.S. Marshals.
I thought you were going to say huge hands.
Huge. People always tell me I have the best hands.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you saying? The
huge work he did with the U.S. Marshals in terms of getting rid of child trafficking.
That is huge, and that is something, that's very near and dear to my heart. The Underground Railroad Association, OUR, a bunch of these things, because I listen, again, always comes back to a podcast, but I listen to a podcast with Paul Brandt is a huge advocate for this too. I just found that out actually a couple months ago, but no, it was a podcast that Sam Harris, I don't even like Sam Harris if you listen to him. He had this guy on, they did like a 4-hour conversation on just how rampant and how just ubiquitous this child trafficking stuff is. Right. I was sick. I was driving home from BC, me and my girlfriend at the time, and we're both like, just look at, we probably didn't speak for 4 hours on the drive home and just listen to this and just like sweating, like visceral reaction to just how awful an issue this is.
I would say this. I'm not going to pretend that my beliefs are respective of the masses or anything like that. But I feel as though it could have just been a single plank. He could have been like, you know what? You're going to hate everything else that I do. Every single other person in this country other than me is going to hate everything else I do. But look at what I did for child sex trafficking, and I'm going to keep not even amping it up. Even if he just kept it at the rate that he was getting rid of that shit, he could have just ran on that as a platform. Be like, I don't give a crap if you hate my economic policy, if you hate my tweets, if you hate this, if you hate that, right? Do you care about the kids?
Yeah.
And that could have been like that just in and of itself. Like, you know what? Don Lemon says I'm fake news. This guy doesn't like me. That guy doesn't like me. That kid is home now.
Yeah. Why? We'll never know, but what, in your estimation, why didn't he do that? And maybe to take that even further, what stops, and this is a very, like, just myself just asking the question really brings up some really scary answers of what stops a Joe Biden,
Dementia.
Okay, fair. But I just, to put my own horse on it, what stops a Tulsi Gabbard? And I think she does speak about these things, and she's one of those people that does. But what stops any politician from making that champion of their cause, right? Like, what? I wonder why and what reasoning they have behind the scenes, because none of any politician's reasoning, maybe other than at Trump, is their own reasoning. They are just taking on whatever the party thinks is going to be their best chance to win, right? It's nothing about what they feel.
All right, so this is going to be a very controversial opinion.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Trump is a flawed individual.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Narcissist, yeah.
So here's the thing, is that this is the same guy who just shows up on September 11th unannounced at New York City precinct or fire departments just to shake hands and just thank the guys for everything that, you know, they probably weren't even all there for, right? This is the guy who just quietly helps people out behind the scenes. And I can't think of a lot of examples off the top of my head, but it does not take a deep dive into the internet. Yeah. And if you think I'm full of shit on this...
I know what you're talking about. I've seen some really beautiful stories come out that people wouldn't know. Yeah,
he's this guy who just... He's kind of got these multiple facets where, he's this big, pompous, egotistical asshole. And I don't think anybody's ever going to take that away from him. Yeah. But then also, when nobody's looking, he'll just come back and he'll pay somebody's hospital bills, or he'll pay their tuition, or he'll do some meet and greet and sit down and have a meal with them, or whatever else it is, right? And I think that he probably... It's just pure conjecture. I think that he saw this whole thing as something that wasn't about him, and it wasn't about his persona. This was something more about what the United States, or maybe even the U.S. Marshals specifically, was fixing, right? Yeah. Where he wouldn't have even considered it, and if anybody would have said, hey, you know what, this will win you the election, hands down, he'd be like, then I'm not going to do it. Right? I think that as weird and complicated as and he's a guy who gets oversimplified quite a lot, right? But he's got this thing where he needs to feel good about being the richest guy and the most powerful guy. But also he needs to be the guy that is doing these things that nobody knows about at the same time. And so he's got this weird dichotomy involved. And then on the other hand, as far as everybody else, I mean, until you listen to Sam Harris, how much of that did you even know was going on? Right. And yeah, it might come across it might come into your office in some briefing, and then it gets filtered out by the people working for you before it even comes across your desk, and you have no idea how pervasive it is, right? And
as well, even if you do realize, like, just say you're a politician and you listen to that same Sam Harris episode I did, and you are exactly aware. As a person, that should matter. But as a politician, it doesn't, because it only matters if the people think that, because they're not doing what's right for them. They're doing what the people want them to do. So if it's not a hot button issue with their voters, it doesn't matter.
Here's the thing, is how many minors being sex trafficked are of legal age to vote?
That's a fair point, right? And
that's a dark question to ask.
Very dark, right?
But I'm pretty fucking sure that somebody in Washington has asked it at some point or another.
Yeah, and I want to push back a little bit on the thing with
push.
All right,
this is what we're here for.
Yeah. I just think of all. I couldn't agree more that Trump was very mischaracterized and very people wanted to just see him as this caricature of what they
like a parody of himself.
A parody of himself, right? And he gave them lots of ammo. But when you don't fall, I never fell for any of that stuff. Right? I used to watch The Apprentice all the time. I had a pretty good idea of who I thought Trump was from that, and just a character that I'd followed
from reality TV.
Right? From reality TV, a little bit, right? But
I hope you can hear how dubious I sound.
I do, and I can see it in the eyes. You're almost got your chin pointed to the ground, and you're looking from under your hood so much. But I just feel like if there was one thing that wasn't overblown, was his need to be liked, his need to take anything on, and you saying that even if it would have won him the election, he wouldn't have done it. I just don't see that. I think that is who he is to the core. He's a winner, and I think that is going to piss a lot of people off to hear that. But I think that is.
I think he's got a split personality, man. There's two completely different sides.
Yeah.
There's the I'm going to do everything to win, and then there's the I'm going to be on the more charitable side of things. Mm-hmm. And I am never going to speak about that, no matter what it costs me, because I'm Donald Trump, and it doesn't matter because I'm still a winner.
Yeah, and maybe. I just think I would agree that he does have those two sides, but to me, from everything I've seen so far, is that other side always wins out. Whatever's going to put him in a better position, it doesn't matter, right? Like, I think he definitely has that other side.
When has he ever sold out on the other side? When has that other side ever been compromised by his desire to win?
I don't think they've ever been put at odds like that. I think that
they did. They did with child sex trafficking in the 2019 or 2020 election.
But he didn't make. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe I'm not saying that. Maybe I need to think on it more.
Hey, that's okay.
Yeah, I feel like I've never thought of this. Of that issue in my overall assumption of who he is as a person, and I feel like I need to sit with that longer before I can give you a good answer, because I think this is like, I think
this is shower thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. But I think sometimes it'd be easy for me to just pick the first thing that pops in my head and throw it out here, but I think I need to sit with that more. And I think maybe what we highlighted the most is that it's a very important issue that is not getting the airtime that it needs.
Absolutely.
Right? That there's more to Trump than what he was painted as, right? Whether good or bad.
Yeah, and, I think you're right on both sides of that, yeah.
And that, unfortunately, the right thing to do does not carry the water. It does not win you the elections, and it does not carry the water that it should because of the political system and how it's set up.
Yep.
Right? And that's unfortunate. And that's what needs to be changed. And that's why, and that brings me all the way back to my thing of what I thought was so sad about when I saw Trump get in on that thing. And I think that it definitely needs to be taken into account that, yeah, drain the swamp is easy to say, harder to do, and that he may have given a really good college try at it and just realized that, I have so many other things to do that just to keep things moving forward and prevent everything from coming to a halt, I can't take that to its ends. But I almost think that that's what it takes, is to get somebody in that doesn't give a shit about winning the next election and playing the political game.
Somebody who doesn't want to be a career politician.
Exactly.
Like a guy who wins the
like
election.
Jocko Willink.
What's that? Yeah, okay.
Who you don't know, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
People will get that.
I was going to say like Jeremy Farkas, who said, I'm not here to be a career politician. I'm here to fix things, and I'm not even going to take the pension.
Yeah, because that's beautiful. I love that.
Like, honestly, that on its own should be like the fact that he just ran on, I'm not here to be a career politician and I'm not signing up for the pension. Like,
so what's he doing now?
Its own, I'm not sure.
We should look that up, because that'd be interesting to me, is to see a guy like, and even to talk to a guy like that. Like, I would love to have that guy on the podcast and ask, what do you know what I mean? Like, to have that conversation and say, geez, we are just spilling beers like a motherfucker today. Here, I'll hold this up. No, we'll just hit pause. All right, the beer's cleaned up. We're good to go. We're back in action. That's only the third beer we spilt so far today.
Second.
All right. I like to add you gotta add a little bit for the sauce.
You were just saying you wanted to be authentic in this podcast like 2 hours ago, motherfucker.
Very fair. Shit. You caught me. All right. Well, that's the first lie I've said on the podcast.
That's probably not true.
That is not true at all. That's such a lie. Oh, that's funny. But yeah, no. I think the whole I don't know. I want to. We're getting up there on time, and I did want to get your ideas on Pat Wren there before we go to. But just to end off that whole thing is, I think what's very obvious to me is just how much corruption and how broken the system is, and how, to me, all the discussion around that and what we should do and shouldn't do is all ancillary to the fact that we just need to be talking more about that the system is broken, and that by buying into the fact of what they want you to buy into is that, you know what, either you're Team Trudeau and it's, you know, O'Toole is a bad guy and all this stuff and we can blame everything on them, or if you're on the other side, it's just Trudeau is a bad guy. It's all the same stuff and they're all doing the same thing, and you need to understand that. And just by talking about that, that's what's going to bring on change, and that's what's going to bring accountability back into the system so that they do have to represent us and not these unions and big corporations and all that
and
bullshit.
themselves,
right? Yes,
right.
For
That's
a huge
the thing.
part themselves.
Jason Kenney is. I'm trying to think of a nice thing I can say about Jason Kenney aside from the fact that. Yeah, okay. How about this? The best thing I can say about Jason Kenney, and this might sound familiar if you follow Canadian politics, is that he's got better hair than a lot of people.
Oh, if I have to hear about a politician's hair so much.
That is honestly the best thing I can say about Jason Kenney. That guy cares about nobody but himself. Mm-hmm. He spent a bunch of time in Ottawa. He designed our current equalization program, right? Okay, you get elected by people from Alberta to go to Ottawa, okay? You don't answer to the people in Ottawa. You answer, well, you do. That's the problem.
You should, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you get elected, you go there, and what do? You go along with the flow because that doesn't get you ostracized from the party.
And that's what moves you up the ladder within politics, yeah.
Yes, and that's how you get cabinet positions. And what do you get when you get cabinet positions? An extra $100,000 a year. You get double the median income of the country as a pay raise by going with the flow rather than
not standing
representing the people.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you look at the carbon tax. So Aaron O'Toole has been very clear on this. Anybody in the Conservative Party who opposes their carbon tax will be kicked out.
Wow.
Okay? Now, it doesn't get ran by the community associations. It doesn't get ran by the locals. So if Blake Richards or Michelle Rempel or anybody else says, this doesn't work for the people that voted for me, the people that pay my wages to be here, the people that I have been chosen to represent, they say, well, we don't give a fuck. You're in Ottawa now, asshole, and you play by our rules, and that means that you toe the line or you get the fuck out and we'll find somebody who will.
Right.
How is that representative democracy?
Yeah.
It's not.
It's not, and it hasn't been for a long time. That's my biggest message.
All right, so Pat Wren, you mentioned Slave before.
Lake MP.
Slave member of the Legislature Assembly.
Yeah.
So he's
whatever it is.
He's
MLA?
He's provincial.
Yeah.
He's an MLA.
Sorry, yeah. They all
for
start
the
with
United. It's,
sorry.
Yeah, they're like Moncatanians. They all look the same.
Exactly.
All right. So anyway, so he's a provincial representative for, I think the riding is called Leicester Slave Lake.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so, I mean, he's your local guy, so you know better than I. So feel free to correct me.
Sure.
At any point along this
ride. And we had the same MLA for, felt like 20 years before him, right? And people were fed up and kind of sick of her because it was the same thing and nothing really ever changed. And we felt like we weren't very represented. And again, take this with a grain of salt. I don't fucking care about local politics all that much. Never followed, but this is just from, my parents and from people in the community. This is what I kind of picked up. We had the same, can't remember her name off the top of my head, but kind of the same lady for years.
She was your representative for 20 years. You can't even remember her name. That's probably pretty indicative of the situation we're in.
Pretty much, right? And it just felt like we were never really getting much. So then we got this new guy, right?
Yeah. So Pat Wren or Wren or whatever. I'm not sure.
Fuck if I know.
I don't know. I hope I'm pronouncing it wrong because you're fucking dick. Anyway, he comes in And he gets elected, and this is a guy who owns several sawmills, from what I understand. Okay? And so then the complaints start piling up from the local First Nations communities,
from the town council, from the mayor,
from the mayor, from all of this stuff.
That he's never there.
Not that he's never there, that he's almost never there, but when he is there, he's completely unprepared for what he's supposed to be there for. And so all of those groups you just mentioned all team up and call for his resignation.
Yeah.
Okay?
After taking a couple steps of talking to him about it.
Yeah. I'm fairly certain that this didn't fall out of the sky, right?
And I've spoken to him. I've had the mayor on this podcast. I've had the one of the members of town council on this podcast, and they talked about that it wasn't something they took lightly. They had tried every other opportunity to change, and that was their last straw, and they didn't take it lightly, and it was done understanding the severity of what they were going to do. Sorry, just to
absolutely. No, that's great. I feel like you should have told me that I could have had that background ahead of time.
Yeah. Sorry,
and you could have shamelessly plugged your podcast. There's a few more episodes listed.
Hey, we're just getting better at this podcast by the time. This is how we learn.
All right, absolutely. Okay, so then Jason Kenney responds, and he says Pat Wren is out of the UCP. So he's going to sit as an independent, and he will never be allowed to be part of the UCP again. And this was January a year ago.
Right.
Okay. And then the NDP
and Pat Wren said, I'm gonna change what I do. I'm gonna be there, and he put some words out there that he was gonna change. Right. I think at that time,
actually, his tweet was basically
it was kind of a fuck you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was at least a little bit of a fuck you.
Yeah.
And I went through his timeline because you mentioned and you said you wanted to talk about it. And so I went through his Twitter timeline. The last time he tweeted was when this whole thing broke.
Yeah.
And he had a bullshit statement that was just like, hey guys, I've been real busy.
Yeah.
And I joined to take down the evil NDP. And at no point did he acknowledge any ownership of the fact that he had taken a job to represent the people of the community and had treated it like a fucking side hustle and had no respect for the people whose concerns that he was supposed to be addressing and helping them navigate the political structure within this province. And so this guy who was just a complete bullshit no-show the whole time. Okay, I get it. Like, you can make a decent argument for saying that the less politicians show up, the better off we are. And in that sense, maybe Justin Trudeau is probably the best political leader we've ever had, right?
At his cottage.
Just let him make 364 and a half fucking statutory holidays about First Nations, and he can fucking surf the whole time, right? Okay, but here's the thing is that in terms of the day-to-day interactions, you need people that you can look to when issues arise. And this is where your local MLAs, your members of parliament come into play, right? So we're in Ron Leeper's riding right now. And I reached out to him early on in his purview, like in his first term, and basically got a fuck you, I don't care, right? About some interesting, like, stuff had basically fallen through the cracks with Revenue Canada, and they tried putting a gun to my head. And then I went to him and he gave me a fuck off. And I said, I literally said to Revenue Canada, I said, you could put a gun to my head, but you better be willing to pull the trigger. And they were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, just do it. Try me. I was like, and I'm not going to get into the finer points of the specifics, but basically it would have been a national newsworthy thing that they were trying to basically, well, they wanted a bunch of tax money paid on some stuff on income that I had never made.
Yeah. Sounds like that.
And then they threatened to just take all the money out of my
Wesley
bank account.
Snipes, yeah?
Yeah, they said, well, we're going to take all the money out of your bank account. If you don't willfully give us your money, we will take it from you. And
par for the course.
And I said, well, go ahead and fucking do it. Basically, I didn't swear, but I literally said to them, if you're going to put a gun to my head, you'd better be willing to pull the trigger. So do it or don't, but don't threaten me.
Yeah.
And then I actually got an apology from them later on. I was like, I am going to get so fucking audited next year.
Yes, you are.
Right?
Yes,
and then I never did, actually, which is weird. But But anyway, I mean, here's the things that you look to your local representatives to help you with.
Right.
And you don't expect to get blown off. You don't expect them to just be like, well, you know what? This is something that's going to be difficult for me, or something that is going to cause me to go up against the public sector unions, or something that's going to require legwork, or something where I can't just solve it with a box of donuts. Right?
Yeah.
So you need these people in your corner on a local level, as much as government as a whole is a fucking disaster.
Yeah.
And this guy has not been there, and he hasn't done it. And so he sat on the bench for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then in June or July, like the summer, Pat Wren got reinstituted, open back with welcome arms. He's a totally changed man.
So
I mean, the whole thing was just a Cinderella story from start to finish. And you think, how much of that is absolute pure bullshit?
Bullshit.
Right? Because here's the thing is, the NDP were calling for his resignation because they're the NDP, and they got to be the opposite on everything, right? Right. And they don't really have a leg to stand on, because look what happened with Deborah Drever. I don't know if you remember her, but in 2015, she got elected in Calgary, and just like everybody else in the NDP, by accident. And so she had a bunch of homophobic tweets or homophobic posts on Facebook, I think it was, about Jim Prentice, so the previous premier of Alberta. And so they said, okay, well, you know what? This isn't working. This girl is just completely uncouth.
Yeah.
So she can't be part of the party. So they kicked her out of the party, and then she continued to use the NDP's marketing team, and she had like the exact same newsletters that they put out, the exact same Christmas card, even though she was sitting as an independent.
Right. She's still using all the faculties that...
Yeah, the stuff that she had no
right to be using.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then she gets welcomed back with open arms as a changed person.
Yeah.
And then everybody says, okay, well, you were a dumpster fire, so get the fuck out. It's been 4 years. Peace out, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing is that there's no
accountability.
There's no accountability. There's no way to just say, okay, well, you know what? This person isn't working. Yeah. Get somebody else. Get them out.
Which is what they were asking at the time. They said either, be here, be prepared, do the job, or we want somebody else.
Yeah. And then that didn't happen. Yeah. And then they said, okay, well, you know what? You're not willing to listen to us. And when have you ever heard of something like that happening where somebody sucks as a politician, which the bar is pretty fucking low. And somebody sucks so much that the entire community rises up and says, get rid of them. Okay? Because there's no recall legislation.
Yeah.
The United Conservative Party tried to bring it in when the NDP were in power.
Yeah.
But then as soon as they were the guys in power, they weren't interested in it anymore, right? Because now it can be used against them. And here's the thing is it shouldn't matter who's in charge. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea.
And it puts power in the people's hands, which politicians don't like.
They do not want people calling their own shots because that's what they get paid for, right? Yeah. And so, 6 months later, this guy gets brought back with open arms. Right. And I don't know what the polling data is in Lesser Slave Lake, or even if
he's very popular.
I can't imagine he's very popular. I'm guessing that he would probably step down after this first term. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Right. But here's the thing is the UCP has just been this bloated bureaucratic bullshit thing. It's the same party that got voted out after 44 years.
Yeah.
Where Jim Prentice called an election a year early just to try and capitalize on the chaos with the Wild Rose Party. This is the same party that did that.
Yeah.
Okay. They've just got Jason Kenney at the head. And now, so you've got all these people. They're all the same people in charge. You've got the by-election coming up at the end of January in Fort McMurray-Lac-La-Biche. So you've got Brian Jean running against Paul Hinman, and some liberal guy who's probably going to get 16 votes, right? That's interesting because that's the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta. I think they're polling at like 20% right now, but don't quote me on that. And so you've got a guy who's been a career politician in that area, right? And there's no boil water advisories in that riding, but there's a neat little corner cutout on one side of it where there happens to be a boil water advisory, right? And there's a huge First Nations well, not in terms of gerrymandering or anything like that, but I'm just saying it's right on their doorstep.
Yeah.
Like literally, instead of there's this little C cutout of the side of the map, and that's where a boil water advisory is, right? This could not be closer to being in that riding.
Yeah.
And so you've got Brian Jean, who's been a career politician who arguably brought about the merger of the two parties, which legitimized the NDP and brought around kind of the downfall of independent thought and actually having people working hard for their job.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the same guy that's running that has had all his friends and neighbors living under all of this. Like, how many boil water advisories have popped up and gone away in that riding over the years? I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm guessing it's a lot less than zero, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something that's a really big in northern communities, and he's just brushed it off because that's a federal problem, right? And so again, like, there's all these people that really don't give a crap because, oh, well, you know what? I can pass the buck. I can pass it up, like what you were saying before, right?
It's just
pass
issue.
it up. And when was the last time you saw a politician that went and said, you know what, that's a federal problem, but they've been trying to fix it for 157 fucking years, so I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to take care of it, and they can eat a dick.
Yeah.
Right? Let's vote for that guy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And we can vote for that guy, but essentially, if he wants to make it any further up, that's where he's going to stay.
That's fine. He'll stay in that position. If you vote him in and he actually solves that problem that the next guy up has been sloughing off, he'll stay in that position for as long as he wants to be there.
But he'll never move up, is the thing. Which sucks. But
you have to be prime minister to be a politician, right?
Yeah. But my issue is just, like, it fills my heart with joy. And again, I would love to talk about Kenny Rutherford more, but it fills my heart with joy to see guys like him who so clearly want to have nothing to do with politics, but see the need and say, fuck, I need to step into this, and I don't want to, and I don't want to bring my family into this, but I need to, and there's a need for it. That fills me with hope. And to know that he could do that and do an amazingly successful job at that and really help his community. That's awesome. And at the community level, we can do that and we can have those people. But then you get to the next level. Okay, well then how do we move that Kenny Rutherford into the next position up? They're going to do everything in their power to block them for that.
Why does he want that next position up?
Like, he was
running for member of parliament. I think he'd be a great leader for the Maverick Party. I don't know. I know they're lining up some kind of a leadership run here, and I don't know if he's interested in running or not, but I would be hard pressed to come up with somebody I think would be a better fit.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
Here's the thing, though. The only thing holding him back is that, like, he's a guy who he should be a household name.
For sure. Yeah, he should.
Like, you shouldn't be able to talk to somebody in Danforth or Grand Prairie or Yellowknife and be like, okay, well, so Ken Rutherford had this thing to say the other day, and they should be able to just be like, yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that, like, he's so enthusiastic and he's so passionate
and kind.
Yes. And everybody knows who he is. I met him one time. We went for a couple drinks and there was, like, every single table had somebody in that entire bar that knew who Ken was and stopped, and he stopped or they stopped and whatever. But he talked to somebody at every single table in that bar.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's what you would hope politics would be from every level. It's that guy in every community is in that position, right? Like,
that's the guy you want. You don't want anybody else.
Yeah.
You don't want some slick asshole who
Pat
spent
Wren.
his. Yeah. You don't want
Not
that.
even
you
from
don't
the
want a
community,
guy.
yeah.
Oh, he's a parachute?
He's definitely not from Slave.
Yeah, I guess you'd know.
And that was part of it. Is he's a guy from somewhere else. Nobody, I mean, I'm sure people know where he is, but he's not from Slave. Came in, ran our riding, promising, and he said, "I'm going to buy a house here. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be here half the year."
I'm going to buy a. Oh, that's why that. whole thing
and then
up,
he was
right?
never, and then he was never there. And like you said, on the couple times a year he would come there, and there had all these meetings planned for all the things because he's not there. You have to jam pack it all into one day. He was unprepared, had no idea, and they would have to spend the whole day just getting him up to speed, and then he'd be gone again.
Because he's a parachute.
Okay,
he's a parachute. That all fits.
And again, I'm just going to throw this out there. Pat Rand, if you're out there and you hear this, fully welcome to come on the podcast and speak for yourself. I'd love to talk to you, and I'd be very kind to you, and we'd have a great conversation. I could get your side from it. But from everything I've heard, this is the answers and the information I have available is exactly that. And I would love to hear your side of it. Maybe you see it completely differently than that. But from everyone I talk to, that's exactly what I've heard.
All right. Now, if I may real quick.
Of course.
Pat Rand, if you're listening, You can come on my podcast and I will pull 0 punches and I will go to the fucking mattresses on you and it's not going to be pretty. But if anything you're saying is not full of shit, then you've got nothing to worry about.
Yeah. I think that'd be interesting. And that's exactly it. Like we're in our little realm, it's me and you, but on the grand scheme of things, like I'm the Lex Friedman of it, where I'm not going to hold him to the fire like a Joe Rogan would, but if he goes on with you, he's gonna get a couple whoa.
Yeah, the whoas, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, here's it's interesting. Like I'm still kind of feeling out so much of this podcast stuff, and I feel like on one hand, you kind of need to be, you can't be a total dick.
Yeah.
To your to your guests,
right.
Like if you just yelled at me the entire time, then 2 months later you say, "Hey, can you come back on again?" I'd be like, "Fuck no,"
that,
right?
Yeah,
but then also
good.
you'd get that reputation for being some guy that's just not fun to be on a show with, right? And then it would be detrimental. But on the other hand, I feel like somebody like Pat Wren, if there was any legitimacy at all in any of the bullshit you kind of spewed to give yourself a sideways out on exactly why you fucking sucked at this job, you'd be able to say it.
Yeah.
And if you can't, then everything we're saying is right.
Yeah.
But either way, be a man and own up to it, right?
Yeah.
And so,
I think that's fair.
I think I'm not interested in, I've done a few guests and I want to start doing a few more here and there because it's not to shit talk or anything like that, but the long form conversations, I think even when you account for, the time you spend cleaning it up and everything like that, they probably take a lot less time than from my crafting a regular episode. 100%. Right? So I can get out more episodes if I kind of mix it up a little bit more. Right. But yeah, that's something that I don't think I said anything unfair here.
Yeah. And as well, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned that at some point was, as much as I think that is your niche and you do an amazing job at those scripted shows that you do, I really did enjoy the interview ones too, because I think what it is when you hear the interview ones, it allows a little bit more a piece of who you are, which definitely comes through in the scripted ones too. But then I feel like it adds to the scripted ones because then you get a little bit more piece of who you are as a person, not just your positions on things. And then that adds to the scripted ones too, because now you have a better idea where it's coming from. That's what I found, at least, because I definitely listened to a lot of the more scripted ones before I listened to the interview ones. And I felt like then when I'd listened to the scripted ones after, I felt like I had a better idea of who you were. And I feel like going forward, that was actually going to be my last question that I wrapped this all up with, was going to be asking you this. Maybe I'll just ask it now. For what you've accomplished so far, I think it's been amazing. I'm curious for you of what do you see as, where do you want to take the podcast and the Twitter? Like, what are the goals that you have for it? What would you like to see of it? What is kind of in a couple of years, what would you be really happy if it was sitting at a certain point? Like, where do you want to take it?
God, I mean, it's still very much fledgling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a mature podcast by any means. I don't think I've done somewhere just shy of 25 episodes so far, right? Yeah. And so I'm very adamant in that I want it to still be as fun as possible, and I want it to be a hobby. It's interesting. It's doing a podcast has done a lot in terms of, for example, speaking during meetings. And I've never, well, actually, that's not true because everybody sucked at some point.
Yeah.
But I've been quite proficient at leading meetings for a long time.
Yeah.
Which is something that I find is a very, very small skill set.
Yeah.
And so, things like that, and things like just being able to have this conversation. Like if we'd have had it a year ago, it wouldn't have gone nearly as well. And I don't know, maybe you think it's shit.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. And I don't want to derail you, but I find it funny. I was amazed at how one-to-one, maybe not one-to-one, but how close to one-to-one the ability to in a corporate setting to be good in a meeting to how good it is to podcast. How close those two are, because I remember as I was at a 23-year-old, I got put into some meetings where almost right off the bat, when I first got into that job, I had to go into a meeting with a couple of Suncor reps and the mill in Grand Prairie. And I got to watch these adults absolutely struggling and dropping the ball and absolutely botching this meeting. And me as a 23-year-old who's supposed to be sitting, I just kind of was like, all right, well, this is fucked up. It can't go any worse. I'm going to step in. And I totally took over the meeting, and I, put everything back together, got the meeting. It's a really like multi-million-dollar deal that's still going to this day. And
nice.
I was amazed at how easy it came to me and how awful most people are at it. And I got to see that more and more.
Honestly, there's a John Cleese video from the 70s.
Yeah.
It's like if Monty Python did a video about meetings called Meetings, Bloody Meetings.
Yeah.
You can find it. It's not on YouTube.
John Cleese is a fucking legend.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But like you can still find this as like an embedded video in a webpage somewhere. Yeah. And if anybody is listening to this right now and they want to get better at meetings, watch that. Mm-hmm. And then there's this guy called Manager Tools. Great podcast. Yeah. By the way. And he's got some really good stuff about meetings. And then I would say get somebody to give you feedback after the meeting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this this is still when Skype was going on. But I had somebody just sit in a meeting that didn't even need to be there. And I'm like, your job is just to watch me in this meeting and give me some game tape, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, you probably can't see it because your little icon is like an inch high.
Yeah.
But when you roll your eyes, everybody sees it. Right? Because there was this guy that I knew was going to be unprepared for the meeting, that I had given specific instructions to be prepared for this in the meeting. And then he showed up with his dick in his hand. And yeah, so I was like, okay, now we move to this guy for this thing. Not with so much pomp and circumstance, but basically that's what it was. And then he's like, so I don't really have that ready. And then I kind of rolled my eyes and I was like, honestly, then why did you, what? Like, this is specifically why I told you this is specifically why you're in this meeting. Mm-hmm. And I was like, don't worry about it. We'll come back.
We'll
to
circle
this.
back.
Yeah. We'll Jen Psaki this fucking thing, right? But anyway, I rolled my eyes when he did it because I was, despite the fact that I was very clear that this was the expectation.
Yeah.
I also knew that he was completely incapable of fulfilling expectations, and he was kind of like a lateral boss, so it wasn't really something that I could just sit him down with and talk to, and it was just a couple steps removed, so I couldn't really manage it. But yeah, apparently I was pretty obvious with my eye rolling, and I was like, oh man, why didn't you should have just jumped in or something like that and said, like, because there was a lot of big swinging dicks on that meeting too, right? But anyways,
that's how you learn, right?
Yeah,
that's why it's important.
Anyways, as far as where I'd love to see this going, I just love the fact that more people are consistently listening every single time. And I mean, if nobody was listening, I'd still be like this by any means, like to have the awesome fans that I do, which is, I've never said that. That was a weird thing to say. Holy shit.
That's what happens after 3 hours and a couple beers. The truth comes out.
Well, no, but like I've never even just talked about it like that, but that's actually kind of weird. Okay, so yeah, as far as like having all these people that just are loving the message I'm putting out, I've never, Jesus Christ, fans? Fuck, I gotta think about this.
Hey,
all right. Like this is just
rattling around that word. Yeah. But I think
but
I find it so funny that so many people have that issue, and I hear it so much of the time because I listen to a lot of podcasts and people have such a hang up on that. But there's nothing wrong with that. If you're proud of what you're putting out and there's people that are fans of it, that's awesome. And you should be able to acknowledge that. And it does feel fucking weird. And I have a real struggle with this. Like, even to promote my own podcast, I hate it. It feels icky. And I feel like you probably do feel the same thing, right? And it's awesome that people enjoy it, but you don't even want to push people. It's like, enjoy. If you love it, that's great. But like, I don't even want to push you towards it because like, I only want you to enjoy it if you truly do. I don't want to push you to it. I don't want to twist your arm, anything about that, right? Like it's a weird dynamic to want so badly for people to listen and to enjoy, but to not want to influence that all other than the actual product itself. It's a very weird thing that you're kind of always tightroping.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about getting business cards made. I mean, you come rolling in here with a whole bunch of awesome Von Dub swag. And I've been rolling around the idea of business cards.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, what'd be really cool to have on the business card is a QR code. And then that could send you a link to halfway through the video for Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley.
Yeah.
Right? Just my 222 cents and then a QR code. People are like, oh, that's cool. Check it out. And then you open it up and it's just me Rick rolling you.
Yeah.
Right? This is how seriously I take this, right? But then at the same time, there's some people in my life who are like, you know what, you're really onto something here and you need to take it more seriously. And I'm like, but that's exactly why I shouldn't take it more seriously.
Exactly.
And so you kind of get in this weird conundrum where do you find, should I put an email address on there along with the QR code?
Yeah.
Right? Where do you find that goofy middle where you're still having fun with it so that you can capture that essence that's resonating with people?
Yes.
And then at the same time trying to make it a little bit more accessible, right? And it's weird, and I haven't figured that out.
Well,
so
if you do, please let me know because I could use a hand with that myself.
Okay, so I guess rule number 1 is business cards with QR codes to YouTube.
All right.
Beautiful. Yeah, I haven't figured out.
I'll get mine going.
And then, so that's step 1, and then step 3 is profit.
Perfect. Who needs step 2? Fuck step 2.
Not a South Park fan.
Oh, I am a South Park fan. I just haven't been able to keep up. Where do you watch South Park?
Dude, South Park, that was from season 2.
Well, then I just haven't rewatched it in a while. I love South Park.
That's the Underpants Gnomes, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, now you're asking me to cast my mind way back. What you need to know is my memory is somewhere between a goldfish and maybe like a dachshund. But like anything further than that, it's dicey.
Okay.
It's dicey.
Well, I mean, both of those would have died from old age back before that episode.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay. All right. So, I guess as far as where I want to go with the podcast, I just want to keep having fun with it.
Yeah.
And I want it to keep evolving.
Mm-hmm.
I introduced the new segment, Jackass of the Week, last episode. And then I was wondering if I should drop the breaking news. And then got a whole lot of very fervent pushback about how I should definitely keep that.
I love that. Yeah.
And so, but it's weird. Like, I've never done stand-up before.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I understand, when you're up there telling jokes, and it stands to reason because you do it with your buddies, right?
Yeah.
But when you're up there telling jokes, you can kind of tell how people react to the different deliveries and things like that, right? And so, I mean, when I'm doing the podcast, it's primarily, I guess, for me, the main thing is to just scratch that itch, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the second thing is I want it to be entertaining.
Yeah.
And that encompasses a pretty broad thing, but I want it to be as entertaining as possible. And so I can't really tell what jokes land and what don't. And it's funny because there's sometimes where I think something's absolute gold.
Yeah.
And it gets brushed past. Like the Let's Go Brandon in the last episode. I was very certain. See, here's the thing, is if you weren't listening for it, because I finished one segment with Let's Go, and then I went into the next segment with talking about Brandon, Manitoba. Right?
I must have missed that one.
Well, here's the thing, was that I tried to do it. The slower you can play a joke, the funnier it is.
Exactly.
But you run that risk of having nobody get the joke.
Yeah.
Right? And so here's like, so I'm like, this is the best Let's Go Brandon that anybody's ever seen. And I'm confident that it's absolutely going to kill.
Yeah.
And then there's like the Tweety birds and stuff that I put in the background of the Pfizer advertisements were killing people in that episode.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, well, yeah, obviously you need to have that. And that's actually where South Park, I would say, is probably another kind of source of inspiration for me where because they do so many little things that delicately craft the joke in exactly the right way. And I really try and incorporate that as well. Okay. But what I think is the funniest thing in the episode is very rarely what is received as the funniest thing in the episode, right? The possible exception being like the Asian rant that I did a few episodes back where I just felt like
that one. That was fucking funny. I listened to that one on the way down.
Okay.
How long was that? That had to be like 3 minutes of fucking.
That was probably like, I don't know, 4 minutes or something.
Because I was going to say, like, it felt like 3 minutes, and that's on double speed. So it had to be, like, I was like, when is it? It's still going. Holy shit. But like, what I loved about it was so funny. And so I loved how poignant and how serious the points were within that of like it. A lot of times with a joke that's run on, it can kind of lose power because it's almost you're
trying to make it longer instead of
exactly
you're trying to stretch it out rather than make it point.
Yeah. And what I found, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I found it almost, you saved some of the better ones for last, so that like it didn't start to peter out at the end. It almost kept like, as the funniness of the repeating was going down, the funniness of like the actual words you were using. And this is going to make no sense to people. I might have to link to that episode, or even like maybe I'll end the podcast if you're okay with it by me like just taking that chunk out of yours and putting it at the end so people know what we're talking about. But
do you need me to send it to you, or can you pull it from? I don't know.
I don't fucking
know. I'm not
know.
an AV guy.
You might
I'll send you the MP3.
Yeah, if you could, that would be fucking awesome, because I'm not very good at this stuff either. But I found that almost the last third of it, they were more poignant and more funny and like and really added on, so that it kept it going. Oh, I actually meant to bring that up to you, whether on the podcast or after podcast. That was of the, I don't know, I've listened backwards to episode 5 now. Mm-hmm. So like I've listened to a good chunk of them. I think that might have been my favorite part of the whole thing, of like all of them. That was awesome, man. Like, how long did that take you to like come up with that idea to record it all? Like, did you start off with like, I've got 2 minutes of it? It needs to be more.
No. So here's what happened.
All right.
Was I was sitting right where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah.
And I was looking over what I had written for the episode that I was going to record. So it was, I don't know, early afternoon on a Sunday, and I was going to record in the evening. Mm-hmm. And I was looking over this whole thing, and I mean, like, this is a full episode written, and I hated it. I was like, this is fucking garbage.
Which I'm sure it wasn't, but...
Well, that's the funny thing, right? This is where I need to make sure that it stays fun.
Yeah.
Because I am really bad. Like, I've scrapped like 2 full episodes, and not including that one, because I used part of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, I was looking at it, I'm like, this fucking sucks. And then there was 2. They weren't the first 2, but they were like the 3rd and 4th one in that rhyme, or something like that. Anyways, but something about like the degradation of our nation, and I was just ranting about Trudeau, and I'm like, well, those rhyme.
Yeah.
I'm like, what else rhymes with nation?
Everything.
And then there was like 9,700 results.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think anybody's done this before.
This is gonna be good.
I'm like, okay. You know, so then you just sort of, you know, rub your hands together real quick, and then you split the screen, and you got one on one side and one on the other, and you're like, okay, so here we go. All right, what words? And like, I went through like 10,000 words in Rhyme Zone or whatever the hell it was, of all the different things that rhyme with nation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, that actually ties in real nice. That ties in real nice. That ties in real nice. And then my girlfriend called me like maybe 15 minutes into this.
Yeah.
She's like, so how's it going? You know, are you getting ready for the podcast? I'm like, no, it sucks, but I got an idea.
Yeah.
She's like, what? I'm not telling you. Like, I'm just starting to figure this out.
Yeah.
Right. Like, okay, I'll leave you alone. She calls like 3-4 hours later. And like, so how's it going? Good. I almost got this bit done. She's like, what? Like, well, actually, that's probably not true. I'm probably about halfway done.
Yeah.
But it's getting there.
Yeah.
She's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, okay. All right. So hear me out on this.
Yeah.
And I read her, you know, probably the first like 3/4 of it or something like that, right? Because the last, you found a rhythm, even with something as weird as that, you found a rhythm, and you got the last little bit of it wrapped up a lot faster than the rest of it did. And then I kind of, you know, what you were saying about, you know, the crescendo of poignancy, that wasn't really intentional. It was more just how I felt. It wasn't really like, oh, this is a bigger issue than that issue. It was kind of just rearranging each one to see how they played together, which I could never explain to anybody how you do any of that, but it was what I was doing anyways. And she's like, holy shit, that's really good. And I'm like, I think it is.
Yeah. You never want to say that about something you do yourself, but I think it might be.
Because I mean, usually I'm wrong. Like, you know, like I said about the Let's Go Brandon thing, where I thought that was hilarious. And then like just crickets about it, right? Right. And so, I mean, obviously sometimes jokes don't land, but, and it's really hard to gauge the feedback. Like you'll get some things where people tend to bring up, you know, they'll give you a running joke, you know, they'll bring up, oh, that funny thing you said, and you see it popping up a little bit more often on Twitter or something like that. And then sometimes people will just reach out and they'll be like, yeah, that bit fucking killed. Right. And so it's really hard to gauge because it's not just the material and it's not just the like there's just so much to it that I can't just be like, okay, well if I say this thing, it's gonna get a laugh.
And the all of the entire episode before that of what you build up and what you talked upon, right? Like putting him in the mood to be ready to laugh at the big joke.
Like, so there's been times where, and again, like this is, I could be totally offside on this. I have no idea, but there's like, I'll usually record it. I've got everything broken down into segments in the show, and that's how I generally record it, is in segments.
Yeah.
But then what I'll tend to do is, like there's been a couple, I guess, and maybe about halfway through my run to date, where I've been like, no, you know what? I need, that's too information heavy of a segment to have at the start.
Yeah.
I need to warm them up with some good fast laughs first. And then I just start, because I'll have recorded it all as the individual segments on Audacity. And then I just start moving them around, like pieces on a puzzle, right?
For sure.
And so I'm like, well, no, I think this will play better if I play this before that segment.
Got to soften them up a little bit, give them a couple body shots.
You got to warm up the crowd, right?
If you just go throwing haymakers right off the start of a round, you're never going to land it, right? You got to throw a couple liver shots, get him dropping his guard a little bit, and then throw the haymaker over the top.
Yeah, and I don't really claim to understand any of it, but it makes sense when I do it. But that doesn't mean that it's actually working. I could have been better off doing it the other way around, but that's the thing, right? Because I'm not doing the same bit every week, although I did accidentally repeat one joke between two episodes. Well, I mean, I don't have production team.
It happens. Fuck. But again, of kind of what I mentioned earlier, little things like that of like having the same joke, that's what keeps it honest. That's what keeps it true to the people listening, that, oh, he doesn't have a production team, right? And that makes it more special. And I didn't say this at the time we were talking about it, but you were talking about, sponsors and some of the jokes you make in that of you don't see, like, you don't blame sponsors for not wanting to stick their neck out to advertise on something that's
it works for everybody,
right? But that's the thing. When you do find sponsors that are willing to, it's so much more powerful because now the listeners know of what type of company they are that understands that and gets the joke and is of a certain ilk that gets the joke and isn't too high on themselves to look down their nose at shit, right? And that is what the power, I know I've said what the power of podcasting is, a lot of different things about it. Yeah. But like some of my favorite podcasts, like Flagrant 2 is these comedians out in New York, and they say the wildest shit, like some of the most offside.
They get sponsors?
Tons of them. And they
really
make wild money. Yeah. And that's the thing. And then they have sponsors, and when a sponsor drops them, they'll talk about it on the podcast, and sure as shit, you know what happens.
They're going to rip them.
Right. And they're going to rip them. But that's the thing. When I hear, a sponsor that rode that was ride and die for them over all these jokes, and then this is the one that come up, this is the one that they bail on or whatever. Fuck that company, right? And to say that is so, that's happened maybe a couple times over the years that they've been doing it, right? Like it's very rare for it to happen. But now when they advertise on that I listen to those advertisements. I don't skip through them because A, they make them funny and they do a really good job of it. But B, I know what they're risking and what the message they're saying by advertising on that podcast. That tells me so much more about their company than anything they could put in the ad of what they could, because when someone's trying to sell to you, you have to take it with spoonfuls of salt, right? Because they're trying to sell you something.
Yep.
But what gives that much more value to me is what they're advertising on, right? Like someone that's going to advertise on the Flagrant 2 podcast, that tells me so much about your company and what you're after and what I want to support. And I would support that 10 out of 10. I bought shit from that advertise on that, even if it's not something, because I want to support what they're doing by supporting them, right? Like it's very complex. And I think that is what the mainstream media and just, they don't understand, because they'll sell out for whoever's going to give them the most cash.
Yeah.
But what those companies are getting bang for their buck wise, people are not watching. Who watches fucking commercials on the hockey game even anymore?
The best
right?
commercials I've ever seen have been on the Norm Macdonald show when they bring out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like those are the best. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe someday some company's going to approach me.
Maybe it's some local brewery that thinks
I'm going to catch hell from my friends and like the avid supporters, because they're going to say, well, look, why don't you go fucking chase these people, dipshit? Yeah. But yeah, if some company comes to me and says, hey, you know what, I want to be on the show. Yeah. They're like, okay, listen, how much of me have you listened to?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm. And it has to be pretty much every episode, because if they're not that diehard, there's no point in us doing business, because you're going to be gone 2 weeks later.
Yeah, yeah, because basically you're you need to realize that as soon as you advertise on this show, there's going to be a segment of people that are going to buy one of everything you sell, and there's going to be a segment of people that are trying to get it talked about on CBC.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it'll get to that point sometime. But,
I think it will.
But I'm more interested. It's a hobby right now. You know how like if I was doing woodworking in my garage, right? You're not gonna sell the first piece you make. Yeah. Right? It's probably gonna go up in your kitchen, then you're gonna look at it. Fuck, that's a piece of garbage. And then you're gonna
move that one to the garage.
You're gonna put it in the garage or something like that, right? And then after a while you're gonna get to the point where you're good enough that you're and so I mean like you're going backwards. And when you get to episode 1, go back and listen to the latest one again, right? Yeah, because I need my view count up, right? But also, you're going to be like, wow, that's a huge transition. Like, that's almost as big as the transition that Penn State swimmer did before they won the state title, right?
100-meter freestyle.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
It's so, a little topical there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I've just been getting a lot better with this, and I've been enjoying it, and I've been very determined to say, okay, well, you know what? Yeah, it'd be great to have Joe Rogan money, right? But I've got Two's money, and it keeps a roof over my head.
Yeah,
and this is just a fun hobby for me, and I'm very reticent to look at it as though it's going to be something that I need to start worrying about.
Right.
I wish it would be nice, as a business, it would be great because it would keep my feet to the fire in terms of determining how often I put out episodes, because I would really love to be better with that. The problem is with the format and my life, I can't always do that, ask, right?
For sure.
Right? But, I'm just this, I'm kind of weird in my head. I'm very much a perfectionist.
You don't say, hey?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, Sean laughs at it because it's just like when I borrowed his studio, he's like, how much time do you need? I'm like, well, it shouldn't be more than a few hours or something like that. He's like, dude, your episode's like 20 minutes. You could just hear it in his voice.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, that's exactly it where it's not so much, well, it's like doing any sport or anything like that. I'm not trying to be the best right now. I'm trying to be better than I was last.
Exactly.
Time, right? And I get a lot of accomplishment out of that, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And I'm not at the point where I want to start evaluating long term.
Yeah.
I'm just having fun doing it.
Exactly. And that's what matters. And that's why people enjoy it. That's the thing that I'm very much the same way. I'm so cognizant of not losing that, right? And I think people that have made it, like the Joe Rogans of the world, that's all he talks about is like, you know what, like that's how I got here, by not caring about it and just enjoying it and making sure that I'm having fun the whole time and I'm laughing at the joke, right? Like you're saying, you don't know if the jokes laugh, but if the jokes land, but if it makes you laugh,
writing them, and I laugh,
and that's all that matters, right?
And then when you're splicing it together and you're just putting, you're like, yeah, I fucking nailed that.
Yeah,
and then
you never know if it does, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you enjoyed doing it. You had a great time. That's what I say with this podcast, right? Like, sure, eventually with my plans, I want it to make money, but that's not the goal. I want to enjoy doing it. And I get so much, and like, just for my own mental health, I noticed like over the Christmas holidays, I was kind of lazy and not feeling up to it and kind of feeling down. I didn't record episodes, and I could see what that did for me and how much doing this is good for me. And I need to, and it's so much more than money or fame or any of those things. Like it's so much more to that for me.
It's that high, dude.
It is.
It's you, and you chase that dragon.
You gotta chase it. Yeah.
God. Well, no, you don't have a choice.
Exactly.
Like, as soon as you start doing that, like when I'll usually like have a little bit of scotch or something like that after. So I'll record the episode and then, maybe like a bourbon, a scotch, and a beer, or whatever.
Yeah. Good song, I think.
Yeah. While I rip it together, and then, that, I don't know. Yeah. I'll finish that up, and then you just kind of have that sense of accomplishment where you're just, you just click.
Yeah.
You're like, done.
Yeah. That's going to upload tomorrow morning, and I can,
Yeah, I fucking nailed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, okay, let me just double check the MP3 real quick. And so you'll just kind of sit there with your headphones on and you play it and you realize you got 2 tracks playing at the same time. You're like, motherfucker. Right?
And I think as much as we hope that we're going to get good, that never happens, I'm sure that's going to keep happening for many fucking years, hey?
Right? But just that high, man. Yeah. Like I can't even, well, I mean, you know, but you at home may or may not know, depending on
what you've done.
Yeah. But just that high of just finishing that individual project and just being like, hey, you know what? I've done this and I'm proud of it. And God damn it, it's going to feel good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then to hear random, like not even just conversations that you're having, like on Twitter, but like when you come up in somebody else's conversation about podcasts that like you didn't even instigate or aren't even a part of. And then all of a sudden it's just like twos. You're telling your friends about this?
Yeah, that's a cool feeling. Or just the
have you listened to it?
Or the random DMs you get from people and
those. Oh man, there's this one guy, Jack Devolver, who, oh my god, like the guy has just. I don't know him. I've never met him.
Yeah.
But I would say that he's probably one of my most motivating people in terms of this podcast. Yeah. He's had so many awesome, encouraging things to say, and it's just been great. Like, you just get these random people reaching out where it just they say it speaks to you and whatever else.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's hard to describe what that feels like. Hey, like that's
yeah. Well, you're just like, no, you're supposed to talk about Jerome McKinley like this, not some
exactly
podcast.
Yeah. But we've already crushed 3.5 hours of your Monday here, and it was a great time. Anything any last things that we missed that we want to talk about? Go follow 222 minutes on Twitter.
222 minutes on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, but because I care more about doing the podcast than marketing it, I'm never on there.
All right.
So,
fair.
well, I mean, you sent me a DM on Instagram and it probably sat there, like, I think it said it was 4 weeks old by the time I even noticed it. And I was like, well, yeah, absolutely, we can do this. And then that was what, maybe a week ago?
Yeah.
That it took us to line up the logistics. But yeah, so I'm on Instagram and I should get better. How about this? Give me shit for not being better on Instagram.
All right.
And no, listeners too, not just you.
For
right?
sure.
The main thing, I guess, is probably Twitter. The jokes really write themselves with the governments, man.
Yeah, fair enough.
So that makes it pretty easy. But
and then the podcast, 222 cents is the podcast.
My
222 cents. Gotcha.
Yeah,
and it's Spotify, iTunes, all those.
You name it. So it's hosted on Buzzsprout. So it's on Google Podcasts. It's on whatever, like
Podbean, Stitcher, all those weird ones.
Absolutely. Like anywhere
YouTube?
you can find. No, not on YouTube because
gotcha.
As pretty as the face is, I don't like to advertise it, right?
But you could even, and that's actually one of the main things I want to talk to you about. And that just means we got to do this again. But just even throw your logo over top and just put it. I found a lot of people, it's just the ease for some reason, especially people of a certain age. They really struggle with the podcast apps, and if it's on YouTube, they love it because they learn YouTube.
Really?
And even that's what I did the first one when I was doing this because I don't have camera set up. We're not going to see it, but this will go up on YouTube eventually, just with my logo over top. So they use it like an audio platform, but it's a video platform, and I found that a lot of people really enjoy that. So maybe just a little thing. Maybe at some point you'll have to add that into the mix.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. I worried so much more about the podcast side of him, where he's way too strong of a word anyway. I just wanted to be as good as I can possibly come up with, right? And so I just had assumed that no one was going to give a shit about a YouTube video that didn't actually have video on it. But I don't know, maybe.
Who knows? Maybe you won't. I think you're doing just fine how you're doing it. Don't let me fuck it up. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for welcoming me into your beautiful home and giving me great beer and great conversation. Can't really ask much more than that for a couple good old Alberta boys, hey?
Well, that's displaced Saskatchewan, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, you just...
You never forget home, man.
You have the spirit of Alberta, we'll say. Spirit of Alberta. But to me, Alberta and Saskatchewan...
They're pretty much twins.
You can knock that border down in the middle and just call us one, Alberta skin. About Alberta skitchin? That's not good.
How about
Scatchaturda?
Scatchaturda. I'm pretty sure that's what
I've tried to say. Yeah, true. Very true.
Yeah, I mean, how about, you know what? There's a town right on the border, and they call it, but
everyone from there is fucking weirdos, though. Sean Newman, Kenny Rutherford, yuck. Hancocks,
well, I mean, they're a little bit more Hillmont. There's another border town. People don't realize this. There's another border town further south on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan.
What's that?
And I feel like they just had 30 seconds to come up with a name, but they called it Alsace.
Alsace, really?
So maybe, yeah. If they ever amalgamate the provinces, we could make that the capital. Although, if the West ever does separate, we need to make the capital Batoche.
Batoche? Where even the fuck is Batoche?
We'll save that for the next.
All right. Sounds good.
There's some people who are gonna listen to it and be like, "Fuck yeah!"
All right. Well, I can't wait to do it again soon. The listeners don't know about my big project coming up, but it'll probably have to be in over a month or so.
Well, I mean, it's not a big project in the terms of you stepping away. It's just a big journey.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good term to put it. And maybe even by the time this comes out, maybe I'll have already let people know. But as soon as I'm back, I'd love to do this again. Maybe we can do it over some Dog Island Brewing beers
Dog
instead.
Island.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I mean, I've heard good stuff about them.
Yeah,
I don't think they're going to beat Far Brewery.
I don't know.
You know what? Okay, let's.
Are we gonna have to have a taste test?
Can we do that? Would
Hell
your buddies
yeah.
be mad when they lose?
Well, fuck, they're pretty good boys. They won't. If they lose, we'll say.
Dude,
I think they'll be pretty gracious in defeat if it were to happen.
Even if they were an amazing beer, which they probably are.
Yeah.
They're going to lose to Far, man.
All right.
They're going to lose to Far.
Well, fuck, maybe I'll have to get them as a sponsor on the podcast just to really throw some weight behind it before the next one. Anyways, all right. That was Nick and Twos, and fucking, I really enjoyed it. I hope you do too.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thanks for having me, man.
All right. We'll do it again soon.
Sounds good.
All right. See you, bro.
Bye.
Congratulations. You made it through a behemoth 3.5 hour conversation about some pretty heavy stuff. If you made it all the way to the end, I really support you. I thank you. That means a lot to me. Tell me what you thought. Reach out to me. Reach out to Twos. We love hearing where we're wrong, where you see something differently. We're always trying to add to our perspectives. This sounds like a conversation maybe you'd like to have, or maybe there's something else within that. Reach out. I'd love to have more guests on. If you feel like you're getting the confidence up to maybe try your hand at being a guest on a podcast, reach out. It's so much fun. I can't begin to tell you. Everyone's always so nervous. I don't know if I can do it. What do I have to say? And then they do it and they're like, oh, that was so much easier than I thought. That was so much fun. I'm so glad I did it. And I'm always looking for more people, especially once I complete this move to the city and I'm less bouncing around and can get a little bit more of a solid schedule. I can't wait to just book myself silly, or even better, find someone to book me, because I'm an idiot and I can't keep myself accountable. But, just to, do a podcast every day, or 5 podcasts a week or 6, I don't know. I would love that. So the more the merrier. Please reach out, do all those things I always ask you in every intro, every outro. Follow me on social media, share the posts, all that fun stuff. Tell somebody that every time you come against someone and podcasts come up and they say, hey, I listen to tons of podcasts. Those are the type of people that would be great if you ask them to give this podcast a shot, because and whether it's one of your favorites or one of the ones I always talk about, just give them one specific episode. Hey, try this one out. Might not be for you. You might love it. So that's what really makes the podcast grow, and I appreciate it if you could do that for me. Other than that, just have a great week, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.